Chapter 25 of At the Back of the North Wind. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. Chapter 25. Diamond's Dream. "There, baby," said Diamond. "I'm so happy that I can only sing nonsense. Oh, father, think if you had been a poor man, and hadn't had a cab and old Diamond, what should I have done?" "I don't know indeed what you could have done," said his father from the bed. "We should have all starved, my precious Diamond," said his mother, whose pride in her boy was even greater than her joy in the shillings. Both of them together made her heart ache, for pleasure can do that as well as pain. "Oh no, we shouldn't," said Diamond. "I could have taken Nanny's crossing till she came back, and then the money, instead of going for old Sal's gin, would have gone for father's beef tea. I wonder what Nanny will do when she gets well again. Somebody else will be sure to have taken the crossing by that time. I wonder if she will fight for it, and whether I shall have to help her. I won't bother my head about that. Time enough yet. Hey diddle, hey diddle, hey diddle diddle. I wonder whether Mr. Raymond would take me to see Nanny. Hey diddle, hey diddle, hey diddle diddle, the baby and fiddle. Oh, mother, I'm such a silly, but I can't help it. I wish I could think of something else, but there's nothing will come into my head but hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle. I wonder what the angels do when they're extra happy, you know, when they've been driving cabs all day and taking home the money to their mothers. Do you think they ever sing nonsense, mother?" "I dare say they've got their own sort of it," answered his mother, "else they wouldn't be like other people." She was thinking more of her 21 shillings and 6 pence, and of the nice dinner she would get for her sick husband next day, than of the angels and their nonsense, when she said it. But Diamond found her answer all right. "Yes, to be sure," he replied. "They wouldn't be like other people if they hadn't their nonsense sometimes. But it must be very pretty nonsense, and not like that silly hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle. I wish I could get it out of my head. I wonder what the angels' nonsense is like. Nonsense is a very good thing, ain't it, mother? A little of it now and then, more of it for baby, and not so much for grown people like cabmen and their mothers. It's like the pepper and salt that goes in the soup. That's it, isn't it, mother? There's baby fast asleep. Oh, what a nonsense baby it is, to sleep so much. Shall I put him down, mother?" Diamond chattered away. What rose in his happy little heart ran out of his mouth, and did his father and mother good. When he went to bed, which he did early, being more tired, as you may suppose, than usual, he was still thinking what the nonsense could be like which the angels sang when they were too happy to sing sense. But before coming to any conclusion he fell fast asleep, and no wonder, for it must be acknowledged a difficult question. That night he had a very curious dream, which I think my readers would like to have told them. They would, at least, if they are as fond of nice dreams as I am, and don't have enough of them of their own. He dreamed that he was running about in the twilight in the old garden. He thought he was waiting for North Wind, but she did not come. So he would run down to the back gate and see if she were there. He ran and ran. It was a good long garden out of his dream, but in his dream it had grown so long and spread out so wide that the gate he wanted was nowhere. He ran and ran, but instead of coming to the gate found himself in a beautiful country, not like any country he had ever been in before. There were no trees of any size, nothing bigger, in fact, than hawthorns, which were full of May blossom. The place in which they grew was wild and dry, mostly covered with grass, but having patches of heath. It extended on every side as far as he could see. But although it was so wild, yet wherever in an ordinary heath you might have expected furze bushes or holly or broom, there grew roses, wild and rare, all kinds. On every side, far and near, roses were glowing. There too was the gum cistus, whose flowers fall every night and come again in the next morning, lilacs and syringas and laburnums, and many shrubs besides, of which he did not know the names, but the roses were everywhere. He wandered on and on, wondering when it would come to an end. It was of no use going back, for there was no house to be seen anywhere. But he was not frightened, for you know Diamond was used to things that were rather out of the way. He threw himself down under a rose bush and fell asleep. He woke, not out of his dream, but into it, thinking he heard a child's voice calling, "Diamond, Diamond!" He jumped up, but all was still about him. The rose bushes were pouring out their odours in clouds. He could see the scent like mists of the same colour as the rose, issuing like a slow fountain and spreading in the air till it joined the thin rosy vapour which hung over all the wilderness. But again came the voice calling him, and it seemed to come from over his head. He looked up, but saw only the deep blue sky full of stars, more brilliant, however, than he had seen them before, and both sky and stars looked nearer to the earth. While he gazed up, again he heard the cry. At the same moment he saw one of the biggest stars over his head give a kind of twinkle and jump as if it went out and came in again. He threw himself on his back and fixed his eyes upon it. Nor had he gazed long before it went out, leaving something like a scar in the blue. But as he went on gazing, he saw a face where the star had been, a merry face with bright eyes. The eyes appeared not only to see Diamond, but to know that Diamond had caught sight of them, for the face withdrew the same moment. Again came the voice calling, "Diamond, Diamond!" and in jumped the star to its place. Diamond called as loud as he could, right up into the sky, "Here's Diamond, down below you. What do you want him to do?" The next instant many of the stars round about that one went out, and many voices shouted from the sky, "Come up, come up! We're so jolly! Diamond, Diamond!" This was followed by a peal of the merriest, kindliest laughter, and all the stars jumped into their places again. "How am I to come up?" shouted Diamond. "Go round the rose bush. It's got its foot in it," said the first voice. Diamond got up at once, and walked to the other side of the rose bush. There he found what seemed the very opposite of what he wanted, a stair down into the earth. It was of turf and moss. It did not seem to promise well for getting into the sky, but Diamond learned to look through the look of things. The voice must have meant that he was to go down this stair, and down this stair Diamond went, without waiting to think more about it. It was such a nice stair, so cool and soft, all the sides as well as the steps grown with moss and grass and ferns. Down and down Diamond went, a long way, until at last he heard the gurgling and splashing of a little stream. Nor had he gone much farther before he met it, yes, met it, coming up the stairs to meet him, running up just as naturally as if it had been doing the other thing. Neither was Diamond in the least surprised to see it pitching itself from one step to another as it climbed towards him. He never thought it was odd, and no more it was there. It would have been odd here. It made a merry tune as it came, and its voice was like the laughter he had heard from the sky. This appeared promising, and he went on, down and down the stair, and up the stream, till at last he came where it hurried out from under a stone, and the stair stopped altogether. And as the stream bubbled up, the stone shook and swayed with its force, and Diamond thought he would try to lift it. Lightly it rose to his hand, forced up by the stream from below, and by what would have seemed an unaccountable perversion of things had he been awake, threatened to come tumbling upon his head. But he avoided it, and when it fell, got upon it. He now saw that the opening through which the water came pouring in was over his head, and with the help of the stone he scrambled out by it, and found himself on the side of a grassy hill which rounded away from him in every direction, and down which came the brook which vanished in the hole. But scarcely had he noticed so much as this before a merry shouting and laughter burst upon him, and a number of naked little boys came running, every one eager to get to him first. At the shoulders of each fluttered two little wings, which were of no use for flying, as they were mere buds. Only being made for it, they could not help fluttering as if they were flying. Just as the foremost of the troop reached him, one or two of them fell, and the rest with shouts of laughter came tumbling over them till they heaped up a mound of struggling merriment. One after another they extricated themselves, and each as he got free threw his arms round Diamond and kissed him. Diamond's heart was ready to melt within him from clear delight. When they had all embraced him, "Now let us have some fun," cried one, and with a shout they all scampered hither and thither, and played the wildest gambols on the grassy slopes. They kept constantly coming back to Diamond, however, as the centre of their enjoyment, rejoicing over him as if they had found a lost playmate. There was wind on the hillside, which blew like the very embodiment of living gladness. It blew into Diamond's heart, and made him so happy that he was forced to sit down and cry. "Now let's go and dig for stars," said one who seemed to be the captain of the troop. They all scurried away, but soon returned, one after another, each with a pickaxe on his shoulder and a spade in his hand. As soon as they were gathered, the captain led them in a straight line to another part of the hill. Diamond rose and followed. "Here is where we begin our lesson for to-night," he said. "Scatter and dig." There was no more fun. Each went by himself, walking slowly with bent shoulders and his eyes fixed on the ground. Every now and then one would stop, kneel down, and look intently, feeling with his hands and parting the grass. One would get up and walk on again, another spring to his feet, catch eagerly at his pickaxe and strike it to the ground once and again, then throw it aside, snatch up his spade, and commence digging at the loosened earth. Now one would sorrowfully shovel the earth into the hole again, trample it down with his little bare white feet, and walk on. But another would give a joyful shout, and after much tugging and loosening would draw from the hole a lump as big as his head, or no bigger than his fist, when the under side of it would pour such a blaze of golden or bluish light into Diamond's eyes that he was quite dazzled. Gold and blue were the commoner colours. The jubilation was greater over red or green or purple. And every time a star was dug up, all the little angels dropped their tools and crowded about it, shouting and dancing and fluttering their wing buds. When they had examined it well, they would kneel down one after the other and peep through the hole, but they always stood back to give Diamond the first look. All that Diamond could report, however, was that through the star holes he saw a great many things and places and people he knew quite well, only somehow they were different. There was something marvellous about them. He could not tell what. Every time he rose from looking through a star hole, he felt as if his heart would break for joy, and he said that if he had not cried, he did not know what would have become of him. As soon as all had looked, the star was carefully fitted in again, a little mould was strewn over it, and the rest of the heap left as a sign that the star had been discovered. At length one dug up a small star of a most lovely colour, a colour Diamond had never seen before. The moment the angel saw what it was, instead of showing it about, he handed it to one of his neighbours and seated himself on the edge of the hole, saying, "This will do for me. Good-bye, I'm off." They crowded about him, hugging and kissing him, then stood back with a solemn stillness, their wings lying close to their shoulders. The little fellow looked round on them once with a smile, then shot himself headlong through the star hole. Diamond, as privileged, threw himself on the ground to peep after him, but he saw nothing. "It's no use," said the captain. "I never saw anything more of one that went that way." "His wings can't be much use," said Diamond, concerned and fearful, yet comforted by the calm looks of the rest. "That's true," said the captain. "He's lost them by this time. They all do that go that way. You haven't got any, you see." "No," said Diamond. "I never did have any." "Oh, didn't you?" said the captain. "Some people say," he added, after a pause, "that they come again. I don't know. I've never found the colour I care about myself. I suppose I shall some day." Then they looked again at the star, put it carefully into its hole, danced around it and over it, but solemnly, and called it by the name of the finder. "Will you know it again?" asked Diamond. "Oh yes. We never forget a star that's been made a door of." Then they went on with their searching and digging. Diamond, having neither pickaxe nor spade, had the more time to think. "I don't see any little girls," he said at last. The captain stopped his shovelling, leaned on his spade, rubbed his forehead thoughtfully with his left hand (the little angels were all left-handed), repeated the words "little girls," and then, as if a thought had struck him, resumed his work, saying "I think I know what you mean. I've never seen any of them, of course, but I suppose that's the sort you mean. I'm told, but mind I don't say it is so, for I don't know, that when we fall asleep, a troop of angels very like ourselves, only quite different, goes round to all the stars we have discovered, and discovers them after us. I suppose with our shovelling and handling we spoil them a bit. And I dare say the clouds that come up from below make them smoky and dull sometimes. They say mind, I say they say these other angels take them out one by one, and pass each round as we do, and breathe over it, and rub it with their white hands, which are softer than ours, because they don't do any pick and spade work, and smile at it, and put it in again, and that is what keeps them from growing dark." "How jolly!" thought Diamond. "I should like to see them at their work too. When do you go to sleep?" he asked the captain. "When we grow sleepy," answered the captain. "They do say, but mind I say they say, that it is when those others what do you call them? I don't know if that is their name. I am only guessing that may be the sort you mean. When they are on their rounds, and come near any troop of us, we fall asleep. They live on the west side of the hill. None of us have ever been to the top of it yet." Even as he spoke he dropped his spade. He tumbled down beside it, and lay fast asleep. One after the other, each of the troop dropped his pickaxe or shovel from his listless hands, and lay fast asleep by his work. "Ah!" thought Diamond to himself with delight. "Now the girl angels are coming, and I, not being an angel, shall not fall asleep like the rest, and I shall see the girl angels." But the same moment he felt himself growing sleepy, he struggled hard with the invading power. He put up his fingers to his eyelids and pulled them open, but it was of no use. He thought he saw a glimmer of pale rosy light far up the green hill, and ceased to know. When he awoke, all the angels were starting up wide awake too. He expected to see them lift their tools, but no, the time for play had come. They looked happier than ever, and each began to sing where he stood. He had not heard them sing before. "Now," he thought, "I shall know what kind of nonsense the angels sing when they are merry. They don't drive cabs, I see, but they dig for stars, and they work hard enough to be merry after it." And he did hear some of the angels' nonsense, for if it was all sense to them, it had only just as much sense to Diamond as made good nonsense of it. He tried hard to set it down in his mind, listening as closely as he could, now to one, now to another, and now to all together. But while they were yet singing, he began, to his dismay, to find that he was coming awake, faster and faster. And as he came awake he found that, for all the goodness of his memory, verse after verse of the angels' nonsense vanished from it. He always thought he could keep the last, but as the next began, he lost the one before it, and at length awoke, struggling to keep hold of the last verse of all. He felt as if the effort to keep from forgetting that one verse of the vanishing song nearly killed him, and yet by the time he was wide awake he could not be sure of that even. It was something like this: "White hands of whiteness wash the stars' faces, till glitter, glitter, glit goes their brightness down to poor places." This, however, was so near sense that he thought it could not be really what they did sing. End of chapter 25. Recording by Marisel Quee. Chapter 26 of At the Back of the North Wind. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. Chapter 26. Diamond takes a fare the wrong way right. The next morning Diamond was up almost as early as before. He had nothing to fear from his mother now, and made no secret of what he was about. By the time he reached the stable, several of the men were there. They asked him a good many questions as to his luck the day before, and he told them all they wanted to know. But when he proceeded to harness the old horse, they pushed him aside with rough kindness and called him a baby, and began to do it all for him. So Diamond ran in and had another mouthful of tea and bread and butter. And although he had never been so tired as he was the night before, he started quite fresh this morning. It was a cloudy day, and the wind blew hard from the north, so hard sometimes that, perched on the box with just his toes touching the ground, Diamond wished that he had some kind of strap to fasten himself down with, lest he should be blown away. But he did not really mind it. His head was full of the dream he had dreamed, but it did not make him neglect his work, for his work was not to dig stars, but to drive old Diamond and pick up fares. There are not many people who can think about beautiful things, and do common work at the same time. But then there are not many people who have been to the back of the north wind. There was not much business doing, and Diamond felt rather cold, notwithstanding his mother had herself put on his comforter and helped him with his greatcoat. But he was too well aware of his dignity to get inside his cab as some do. A cabman ought to be above minding the weather, at least so Diamond thought. At length he was called to a neighbouring house, where a young woman with a heavy box had to be taken to Wapping for a coast steamer. He did not find it at all pleasant, so far east and so near the river, for the roughs were in great force. However, there being no block, not even in Nightingale Lane, he reached the entrance of the wharf, and set down his passenger without annoyance. But as he turned to go back, some idlers, not content with chaffing him, showed a mind to the fare the young woman had given him. They were just pulling him off the box, and Diamond was shouting for the police, when a pale-faced man in very shabby clothes, but with the look of a gentleman somewhere about him, came up, and making good use of his stick, drove them off. "Now, my little man," he said, "get on while you can. Don't lose any time. This is not a place for you." But Diamond was not in the habit of thinking only of himself. He saw that his new friend looked weary, if not ill, and very poor. "Won't you jump in, sir?" he said. "I will take you wherever you like." "Thank you, my man, but I have no money, so I can't." "Oh, I don't want any money. I shall be much happier if you will get in. You have saved me all I had. I owe you a lift, sir." "Which way are you going?" "To Charing Cross, but I don't mind where I go." "Well, I am very tired. If you will take me to Charing Cross, I shall be greatly obliged to you. I have walked from Gravesend, and had hardly a penny left to get through the tunnel." So saying, he opened the door and got in, and Diamond drove away. But as he drove, he could not help fancying he had seen the gentleman, for Diamond knew he was a gentleman before. Do all he could, however, he could not recall where or when. Meantime his fare, if we may call him such, seeing he was to pay nothing, whom the relief of being carried had made less and less inclined to carry himself, had been turning over things in his mind, and, as they passed the Mint, called to Diamond, who stopped the horse, got down, and went to the window. "If you didn't mind taking me to Chiswick, I should be able to pay you when we got there. It's a long way, but you shall have the whole fare from the docks, and something over." "Very well, sir," said Diamond. "I shall be most happy." He was just clambering up again when the gentleman put his head out of the window and said, "It's the Wilderness, Mr. Coleman's place, but I'll direct you when we come into the neighbourhood." It flashed upon Diamond who he was, but he got upon his box to arrange his thoughts before making any reply. The gentleman was Mr. Evans, to whom Miss Coleman was to have been married, and Diamond had seen him several times with her in the garden. I have said that he had not behaved very well to Miss Coleman. He had put off their marriage more than once in a cowardly fashion, merely because he was ashamed to marry upon a small income, and live in a humble way. When a man thinks of what people will say in such a case, he may love, but his love is but a poor affair. Mr. Coleman took him into the firm as a junior partner, and it was in a measure through his influence that he entered upon those speculations which ruined him. So his love had not been a blessing. The ship which North Wind had sunk was their last venture, and Mr. Evans had gone out with it in the hope of turning its cargo to the best advantage. He was one of the single boatload which managed to reach a desert island, and he had gone through a great many hardships and sufferings since then. But he was not past being taught, and his troubles had done him no end of good, for they had made him doubt himself, and began to think, so that he had come to see that he had been foolish as well as wicked. For if he had had Miss Coleman with him in the desert island, to build her a hut, and hunt for her food, and make clothes for her, he would have thought himself the most fortunate of men. And when he was at home, he would not marry till he could afford a manservant. Before he got home again, he had even begun to understand that no man can make haste to be rich without going against the will of God, in which case it is the one frightful thing to be successful. So he had come back a more humble man, and longing to ask Miss Coleman to forgive him, but he had no idea what ruin had fallen upon them, for he had never made himself thoroughly acquainted with the firm's affairs. Few speculative people do know their own affairs. Hence he never doubted he should find matters much as he left them, and expected to see them all at the Wilderness as before. But if he had not fallen in with Diamond, he would not have thought of going there first. What was Diamond to do? He had heard his father and mother drop some remarks concerning Mr. Evans, which made him doubtful of him. He understood that he had not been so considerate as he might have been. So he went rather slowly till he should make up his mind. It was of course of no use to drive Mr. Evans to Chiswick, but if he should tell him what had befallen them, and where they lived now, he might put off going to see them, and he was certain that Miss Coleman at least must want very much to see Mr. Evans. He was pretty sure also that the best thing in any case was to bring them together and let them set matters right for themselves. The moment he came to this conclusion, he changed his course from westward to northward, and went straight for Mr. Coleman's poor little house in Hoxton. Mr. Evans was too tired and too much occupied with his thoughts to take the least notice of the streets they passed through, and had no suspicion, therefore, of the change of direction. By this time the wind had increased almost to a hurricane, and as they had often to head it, it was no joke for either of the Diamonds. The distance, however, was not great. Before they reached the street where Mr. Coleman lived, it blew so tremendously that when Miss Coleman, who was going out a little way, opened the door, it dashed against the wall with such a bang that she was afraid to venture, and went in again. In 5 minutes after, Diamond drew up at the door. As soon as he had entered the street, however, the wind blew right behind them, and when he pulled up, old Diamond had so much ado to stop the cab against it, that the breeching broke. Young Diamond jumped off his box, knocked loudly at the door, then turned to the cab and said, before Mr. Evans had quite begun to think something must be amiss, "Please, sir, my harness has given away. Would you mind stepping in here for a few minutes? They're friends of mine. I'll take you where you like after I've got it mended. I shan't be many minutes, but you can't stand in this wind." Half stupid with fatigue and want of food, Mr. Evans yielded to the boy's suggestion, and walked in at the door which the maid held with difficulty against the wind. She took Mr. Evans for a visitor, as indeed he was, and showed him into the room on the ground floor. Diamond, who had followed into the hall, whispered to her as she closed the door, "Tell Miss Coleman it's Miss Coleman he wants to see." "I don't know," said the maid. "He don't look much like a gentleman." "He is, though, and I know him, and so does Miss Coleman." The maid could not but remember Diamond, having seen him when he and his father brought the ladies home. So she believed him, and went to do what he told her. What passed in the little parlour when Miss Coleman came down does not belong to my story, which is all about Diamond. If he had known that Miss Coleman thought Mr. Evans was dead, perhaps he would have managed differently. There was a cry and a running to and fro in the house, and then all was quiet again. Almost as soon as Mr. Evans went in, the wind began to cease, and was now still. Diamond found that by making the breeching just a little tighter than was quite comfortable for the old horse, he could do very well for the present, and, thinking it better to let him have his bag in this quiet place, he sat on the box till the old horse should have eaten his dinner. In a little while Mr. Evans came out and asked him to come in. Diamond obeyed, and to his delight Miss Coleman put her arms round him and kissed him, and there was payment for him, not to mention the 5 precious shillings she gave him, which he could not refuse because his mother wanted them so much at home for his father. He left them nearly as happy as they were themselves. The rest of the day he did better, and although he had not so much to take home as the day before, yet on the whole the result was satisfactory. And what a story he had to tell his father and mother about his adventures, and how he had done, and what was the result. They asked him such a multitude of questions, some of which he could answer, and some of which he could not answer, and his father seemed ever so much better from finding that his boy was already not only useful to his family, but useful to other people, and quite taking his place as a man who judged what was wise, and did work worth doing. For a fortnight Diamond went on driving his cab and keeping his family. He had begun to be known about some parts of London, and people would prefer taking his cab because they liked what they heard of him. One gentleman who lived near the Mews engaged him to carry him to the city every morning at a certain hour, and Diamond was punctual as clockwork, though to effect that required a good deal of care, for his father's watch was not much to be depended on, and had to be watched itself by the clock of St. George's Church. Between the two, however, he did make a success of it. After that fortnight, his father was able to go out again. Then Diamond went to make inquiries about Nanny, and this led to something else. End of chapter 26. Recording by Marisol Kui. Chapter 27 of At the Back of the North Wind. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. Chapter 27. The Children's Hospital. The first day his father resumed his work, Diamond went with him as usual. In the afternoon, however, his father, having taken a fare to the neighbourhood, went home, and Diamond drove the cab the rest of the day. It was hard for old Diamond to do all the work, but they could not afford to have another horse. They contrived to save him as much as possible, and fed him well, and he did bravely. The next morning his father was so much stronger that Diamond thought he might go and ask Mr. Raymond to take him to see Nanny. He found him at home. His servant had grown friendly by this time, and showed him in without any cross-questioning. Mr. Raymond received him with his usual kindness, consented at once, and walked with him to the hospital, which was close at hand. It was a comfortable old-fashioned house, built in the reign of Queen Anne, and in her day, no doubt, inhabited by rich and fashionable people. Now it was a home for poor sick children, who were carefully tended for love's sake. There are regions in London where a hospital in every other street might be full of such children, whose fathers and mothers are dead, or unable to take care of them. When Diamond followed Mr. Raymond into the room where those children who had got over the worst of their illness and were growing better lay, he saw a number of little iron bedsteads, with their heads to the walls, and in every one of them a child, whose face was a story in itself. In some, health had begun to appear in a tinge upon the cheeks, and a doubtful brightness in the eyes, just as out of the cold dreary winter the spring comes in blushing buds and bright crocuses. In others there were more of the signs of winter left. Their faces reminded you of snow and keen cutting winds, more than of sunshine and soft breezes and butterflies. But even in them the signs of suffering told that the suffering was less, and that if the springtime had but arrived, it had yet arrived. Diamond looked all round, but could see no Nanny. He turned to Mr. Raymond with a question in his eyes. "Well?" said Mr. Raymond. "Nanny's not here," said Diamond. "Oh, yes, she is." "I don't see her." "I do, though. There she is." He pointed to a bed right in front of where Diamond was standing. "That's not Nanny," he said. "It is Nanny. I have seen her many times since you have. Illness makes a great difference." "Why, that girl must have been to the back of the north wind," thought Diamond, but he said nothing, only stared, and as he stared, something of the old Nanny began to dawn through the face of the new Nanny. The old Nanny, though a good girl and a friendly girl, had been rough, blunt in her speech, and dirty in her person. Her face would always have reminded one who had already been to the back of the north wind of something he had seen in the best of company, but it had been coarse notwithstanding, partly from the weather, partly from her living amongst low people, and partly from having to defend herself. Now it was so sweet and gentle and refined that she might have had a lady and gentleman for a father and mother, and Diamond could not help thinking of words which he had heard in the church the day before. Surely it is good to be afflicted, or something like that. North Wind, somehow or other, must have had to do with her. She had grown from a rough girl into a gentle maiden. Mr. Raymond, however, was not surprised, for he was used to see such lovely changes, something like the change which passes upon the crawling, many-footed creature when it turns sick and ill, and revives a butterfly with 2 wings instead of many feet. Instead of her having to take care of herself, kind hands ministered to her, making her comfortable and sweet and clean, soothing her aching head, and giving her cooling drink when she was thirsty. And kind eyes, the stars of the kingdom of heaven, had shone upon her, so that, what with the fire of the fever and the dew of tenderness, that which was coarse in her had melted away, and her whole face had grown so refined and sweet that Diamond did not know her. But as he gazed, the best of the old face, all the true and good part of it, that which was Nanny herself, dawned upon him, like the moon coming out of a cloud, until at length, instead of only believing Mr. Raymond that this was she, he saw for himself that it was Nanny indeed, very worn, but grown beautiful. He went up to her. She smiled. He had heard her laugh, but had never seen her smile before. "Nanny, do you know me?" said Diamond. She only smiled again, as if the question was amusing. She was not likely to forget him, for although she did not yet know it was he who had got her there, she had dreamed of him often, and had talked much about him when delirious. Nor was it much wonder, for he was the only boy except Joe who had ever shown her kindness. Meantime Mr. Raymond was going from bed to bed, talking to the little people. Every one knew him, and every one was eager to have a look and a smile and a kind word from him. Diamond sat down on a stool at the head of Nanny's bed. She laid her hand in his. No one else of her old acquaintance had been near her. Suddenly a little voice called aloud, "Won't Mr. Raymond tell us a story?" "Oh yes, please do," cried several little voices, which also were stronger than the rest, for Mr. Raymond was in the habit of telling them a story when he went to see them, and they enjoyed it far more than the other things which the nice doctor had permitted him to give them. "Very well," said Mr. Raymond, "I will. What sort of story shall it be?" "A true story," said one little girl. "A fairy tale," said a little boy. "Well," said Mr. Raymond, "I suppose as there is a difference, I may choose. I can't think of any true story just at this moment, so I will tell you a sort of fairy one." "Oh, jolly!" exclaimed the little boy who had called out for a fairy tale. "It came into my head this morning as I got out of bed," continued Mr. Raymond, "and if it turns out pretty well, I will write it down, and get somebody to print it for me, and then you shall read it when you like." "Then nobody ever heard it before?" asked one older child. "No, nobody." "Oh!" exclaimed several, thinking it very grand to have the first telling. And I dare say there might be a peculiar freshness about it, because everything would be nearly as new to the story teller himself as to the listeners. Some were only sitting up, and some were lying down, so there could not be the same busy gathering, bustling, and shifting to and fro with which children generally prepare themselves to hear a story, but their faces, and the turning of their heads, and many feeble exclamations of expected pleasure, showed that all such preparations were making within them. Mr. Raymond stood in the middle of the room, that he might turn from side to side, and give each a share of seeing him. Diamond kept his place by Nanny's side, with her hand in his. I do not know how much of Mr. Raymond's story the smaller children understood. Indeed, I don't quite know how much there was in it to be understood, for in such a story every one has just to take what he can get. But they all listened with apparent satisfaction, and certainly with great attention. Mr. Raymond wrote it down afterwards, and here it is, somewhat altered no doubt, for a good story-teller tries to make his stories better every time he tells them. I cannot myself help thinking that he was somewhat indebted for this one to the old story of the Sleeping Beauty. End of chapter 27. Recording by Maricel Cui. Chapter 28 of At the Back of the North Wind. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. Chapter 28. Little Daylight. No house of any pretension to be called a palace is in the least worthy of the name, except it has a wood near it, very near it, and the nearer the better. Not all round it, I don't mean that, for a palace ought to be open to the sun and wind, and stand high and brave, with weathercocks glittering and flags flying. But on one side of every palace there must be a wood. And there was a very grand wood indeed, beside the palace of the king, who was going to be Daylight's father. Such a grand wood that nobody had yet ever got to the other end of it. Near the house it was kept very trim and nice, and it was free of brushwood for a long way in. But by degrees it got wild, and it grew wilder and wilder and wilder, until some said wild beasts at last did what they liked in it. The king and his courtiers often hunted, however, and this kept the wild beasts far away from the palace. One glorious summer morning, when the wind and sun were out together, when the vanes were flashing and the flags frolicking against the blue sky, little Daylight made her appearance from somewhere, nobody could tell where, a beautiful baby with such bright eyes that she might have come from the sun. Only by and by she showed such lively ways that she might equally well have come out of the wind. There was great jubilation in the palace, for this was the first baby the queen had had, and there is as much happiness over a new baby in a palace as in a cottage. But there is one disadvantage of living near a wood. You do not know quite who your neighbours may be. Everybody knew there were in it several fairies, living within a few miles of the palace, who always had had something to do with each new baby that came, for fairies lived so much longer than we, that they can have business with a good many generations of human mortals. The curious houses they lived in were well known also. One a hollow oak, another a birch tree, though nobody could ever find how that fairy made a house of it. Another a hut of growing trees intertwined, and patched up with turf and moss. But there was another fairy who had lately come to the place, and nobody even knew she was a fairy except the other fairies. A wicked old thing she was, always concealing her power, and being as disagreeable as she could in order to tempt people to give her offence. that she might have the pleasure of taking vengeance upon them. The people about thought she was a witch, and those who knew her by sight were careful to avoid offending her. She lived in a mud house in a swampy part of the forest. In all history we find that fairies give their remarkable gifts to prince or princess, or any child of sufficient importance in their eyes, always at the christening. Now this we can understand, because it is an ancient custom amongst human beings as well, and it is not hard to explain why wicked fairies should choose the same time to do unkind things, but it is difficult to understand how they should be able to do them, for you would fancy all wicked creatures would be powerless on such an occasion. But I never knew of any interference on the part of the wicked fairy that did not turn out a good thing in the end. What a good thing, for instance, that it was that one princess should sleep for 100 years. Was she not saved from all the plague of young men who were not worthy of her? And did she not come awake exactly at the right moment, when the right prince kissed her? For my part, I cannot help wishing a good many girls would sleep till just the same fate overtook them. It would be happier for them, and more agreeable to their friends. Of course, all the known fairies were invited to the christening, but the king and queen never thought of inviting an old witch. For the power of the fairies they have by nature, whereas a witch gets her power by wickedness. The other fairies, however, knowing the danger thus run, provided as well as they could against accidents from her quarter. But they could neither render her powerless, nor could they arrange their gifts in reference to hers beforehand, for they could not tell what those might be. Of course, the old hag was there without being asked. Not to be asked was just what she wanted, that she might have a sort of reason for doing what she wished to do. For somehow even the wickedest of creatures likes a pretext for doing the wrong thing. 5 fairies had one after the other given the child such gifts as each counted best, and the 5th had just stepped back to her place in the surrounding splendour of ladies and gentlemen, when, mumbling a laugh between her toothless gums, the wicked fairy hobbled out into the middle of the circle, and at the moment when the archbishop was handing the baby to the lady at the head of the nursery department of state affairs, addressed him thus, giving a bite or two to every word before she could part with it. "Please, your grace, I am very deaf. Would your grace mind repeating the princess's name?" "With pleasure, my good woman," said the archbishop, stooping to shout in her ear. "The infant's name is Little Daylight." "And Little Daylight it shall be," cried the fairy, in the tone of a dry axle. "And little good shall any of her gifts do her, for I bestow upon her the gift of sleeping all day long, whether she will or not. Ha ha! He he! He he!" Then out started the 6th fairy, who, of course, the others had arranged should come after the wicked one, in order to undo as much as she might. "If she sleep all day," she said mournfully, "she shall at least wake all night." "A nice prospect for her mother and me," thought the poor king, for they loved her far too much to give her up to nurses, especially at night, as most kings and queens do, and are sorry for it afterwards. "You spoke before I had done," said the wicked fairy. "That's against the law. It gives me another chance." "I beg your pardon," said the other fairies all together. "She did. I hadn't done laughing," said the crone. "I had only got to he he, and I had to go through ho ho and hu hu. So I decree that if she wakes all night, she shall wax and wane with its mistress the moon, and what that may mean I hope her royal parents will live to see. Ho ho! Hu hu!" But out stepped another fairy, for they had been wise enough to keep 2 in reserve, because every fairy knew the trick of 1. "Until," said the 7th fairy, "a prince comes who shall kiss her without knowing it." The wicked fairy made a horrid noise like an angry cat, and hobbled away. She could not pretend that she had not finished her speech this time, for she had laughed ho ho and hu hu. "I don't know what that means," said the poor king to the seventh fairy. "Don't be afraid. The meaning will come with the thing itself," said she. The assembly broke up, miserable enough, the queen at least prepared for a good many sleepless nights, and the lady at the head of the nursery department anything but comfortable in the prospect before her, for of course the queen could not do it all. As for the king, he made up his mind with what courage he could summon to meet the demands of the case, but wondered whether he could, with any propriety, require the first lord of the treasury to take a share in the burden laid upon him. I will not attempt to describe what they had to go through for some time, but at last the household settled into a regular system, a very irregular one in some respects, for at certain seasons the palace rang all night with bursts of laughter from little Daylight, whose heart the old fairy's curse could not reach. She was Daylight still, only a little in the wrong place, for she always dropped to sleep at the first hint of dawn in the east. But her merriment was of short duration. When the moon was at the full, she was in glorious spirits, and as beautiful as it was possible for a child of her age to be. But as the moon waned, she faded, until at last she was wan and withered like the poorest, sickliest child you might come upon in the streets of a great city in the arms of a homeless mother. Then the night was as quiet as the day, for the little creature lay in her gorgeous cradle night and day with hardly a motion, and indeed at last without even a moan, like one dead. At first they often thought she was dead, but at last they got used to it, and only consulted the almanac to find the moment when she would begin to revive, which, of course, was with the first appearance of the silver thread of the crescent moon. Then she would move her lips, and they would give her a little nourishment, and she would grow better and better and better, until for a few days she was splendidly well. When well, she was always merriest out in the moonlight, but even when near her worst, she seemed better when, in warm summer nights, they carried her cradle out into the light of the waning moon. Then in her sleep she would smile the faintest, most pitiful smile. For a long time very few people ever saw her awake. As she grew older, she became such a favourite, however, that about the palace there were always some who would contrive to keep awake at night in order to be near her. But she soon began to take every chance of getting away from her nurses and enjoying her moonlight alone. And thus things went on until she was nearly 17 years of age. Her father and mother had by that time got so used to the odd state of things that they had ceased to wonder at them. All their arrangements had reference to the state of the Princess Daylight, and it is amazing how things contrive to accommodate themselves, but how any prince was ever to find and deliver her appeared inconceivable. As she grew older, she had grown more and more beautiful, with the sunniest hair and the loveliest eyes of heavenly blue, brilliant and profound as the sky of a June day. But so much more painful and sad was the change as her bad time came on. The more beautiful she was in the full moon, the more withered and worn she did become as the moon waned. At the time at which my story has now arrived, she looked, when the moon was small or gone, like an old woman exhausted with suffering. This was the more painful that her appearance was unnatural. Her hair and eyes did not change. Her wan face was both drawn and wrinkled, and had an eager, hungry look. Her skinny hands moved as if wishing, but unable, to lay hold of something. Her shoulders were bent forward, her chest went in, and she stooped as if she were 80 years old. At last she had to be put to bed, and there await the flow of the tide of life. But she grew to dislike being seen, still more being touched by any hands during this season. One lovely summer evening, when the moon lay all but gone upon the verge of the horizon, she vanished from her attendants, and it was only after searching for her a long time in great terror that they found her fast asleep in the forest, at the foot of a silver birch, and carried her home. A little way from the palace there was a great open glade, covered with the greenest and softest grass. This was her favourite haunt, for here the full moon shone free and glorious, while through a vista in the trees she could generally see more or less of the dying moon as it crossed the opening. Here she had a little rustic house built for her, and here she mostly resided. None of the court might go there without leave, and her own attendants had learned by this time not to be officious in waiting upon her, so that she was very much at liberty. Whether the good fairies had anything to do with it or not, I cannot tell, but at last she got into the way of retreating further into the wood every night as the moon waned, so that sometimes they had great trouble in finding her, but she was always very angry if she discovered they were watching her. They scarcely dared to do so. At length one night they thought they had lost her altogether. It was morning before they found her. Feeble as she was, she had wandered into a thicket a long way from the glade, and there she lay, fast asleep of course. Although the fame of her beauty and sweetness had gone abroad, yet as everybody knew she was under a bad spell, no king in the neighbourhood had any desire to have her for a daughter-in-law. There were serious objections to such a relation. About this time, in a neighbouring kingdom, in consequence of the wickedness of the nobles, an insurrection took place upon the death of the old king. The greater part of the nobility was massacred, and the young prince was compelled to flee for his life, disguised like a peasant. For some time, until he got out of the country, he suffered much from hunger and fatigue, but when he got into that ruled by the princess's father, and had no longer any fear of being recognized, he fared better, for the people were kind. He did not abandon his disguise, however. One tolerable reason was that he had no other clothes to put on, and another that he had very little money, and did not know where to get any more. There was no good in telling everybody he met that he was a prince, for he felt that a prince ought to be able to get on like other people, else his rank only made a fool of him. He had read of princes setting out upon adventure, and here he was out in a similar case, only without having had a choice in the matter. He would go on and see what would come of it. For a day or two he had been walking through the palace wood, and had had next to nothing to eat, when he came upon the strangest little house, inhabited by a very nice, tidy, motherly old woman. This was one of the good fairies. The moment she saw him, she knew quite well who he was, and what was going to come of it, but she was not at liberty to interfere with the orderly march of events. She received him with the kindness she would have shown to any other traveller, and gave him bread and milk, which he thought the most delicious food he had ever tasted, wondering that they did not have it for dinner at the palace sometimes. The old woman pressed him to stay all night. When he awoke, he was amazed to find how well and strong he felt. She would not take any of the money he offered, but begged him, if he found occasion of continuing in the neighbourhood, to return and occupy the same quarters. "Thank you much, good mother," answered the prince, "but there is little chance of that. The sooner I get out of this wood, the better." "I don't know that," said the fairy. "What do you mean?" asked the prince. "Why, how should I know?" returned she. "I can't tell," said the prince. "Very well," said the fairy. "How strangely you talk," said the prince. "Do I?" said the fairy. "Yes, you do," said the prince. "Very well," said the fairy. The prince was not used to be spoken to in this fashion, so he felt a little angry, and turned and walked away. But this did not offend the fairy. She stood at the door of her little house looking after him, till the trees hid him quite. Then she said, "At last!" and went in. The prince wandered and got nowhere. The sun sank and went out of sight, and he seemed no nearer the end of the wood than ever. He sat down on a fallen tree, ate a bit of bread the old woman had given him, and waited for the moon. For although he was not much of an astronomer, he knew the moon would rise some time, because she had risen the night before. Up she came, slow and slow, but of a good size, pretty nearly round indeed, whereupon, greatly refreshed by his piece of bread, he got up and went, he knew not whither. After walking a considerable distance, he thought he was coming to the outside of the forest, but when he reached what he thought the last of it, he found himself only upon the edge of a great open space in it, covered with grass. The moon shone very bright, and he thought he had never seen a more lovely spot. Still it looked dreary because of its loneliness, for he could not see the house at the other side. He sat down, weary again, and gazed into the glade. He had not seen so much room for several days. All at once he spied something in the middle of the grass. What could it be? It moved. It came nearer. Was it a human creature gliding across? A girl dressed in white, gleaming in the moonshine? She came nearer and nearer. He crept behind a tree and watched, wondering. It must be some strange being of the wood, a nymph whom the moonlight and the warm dusky air had enticed from her tree. But when she came close to where he stood, he no longer doubted she was human, for he had caught sight of her sunny hair and her clear blue eyes, and the loveliest face and form that he had ever seen. All at once she began singing like a nightingale, and dancing to her own music, with her eyes ever turned towards the moon. She passed close to where he stood, dancing on by the edge of the trees and away in a great circle towards the other side, until he could see but a spot of white in the yellowish green of the moonlit grass. But when he feared it would vanish quite, the spot grew, and became a figure once more. She approached him again, singing and dancing and waving her arms over her head until she had completed the circle. Just opposite his tree she stood, ceased her song, dropped her arms, and broke out into a long, clear laugh, musical as a brook. Then, as if tired, she threw herself on the grass and lay gazing at the moon. The prince was almost afraid to breathe lest he should startle her, and she should vanish from his sight. As to venturing near her, that never came into his head. She had lain for a long hour or longer, when the prince began again to doubt concerning her. Perhaps she was but a vision of his own fancy, or was she a spirit of the wood after all? If so, he too would haunt the wood, glad to have lost kingdom and everything for the hope of being near her. He would build him a hut in the forest, and there he would live for the pure chance of seeing her again. Upon nights like this at least, she would come out and bask in the moonlight, and make his soul blessed. But while he thus dreamed, she sprang to her feet, turned her face full to the moon, and began singing as she would draw her down from the sky by the power of her entrancing voice. She looked more beautiful than ever. Again she began dancing to her own music, and danced away into the distance. Once more she returned in a similar manner, but although he was watching as eagerly as before, what with fatigue and what with gazing, he fell asleep before she came near him. When he awoke, it was broad daylight, and the princess was nowhere. He could not leave the place. What if she should come the next night? He would gladly endure a day's hunger to see her yet again. He would buckle his belt quite tight. He walked round the glade to see if he could discover any prints of her feet, but the grass was so short, and her steps had been so light, that she had not left a single trace behind her. He walked half-way round the wood without seeing anything to account for her presence. Then he spied a lovely little house, with thatched roof and low eaves, surrounded by an exquisite garden, with doves and peacocks walking in it. Of course this must be where the gracious lady who loved the moonlight lived. Forgetting his appearance, he walked towards the door, determined to make inquiries. But as he passed a little pond full of gold and silver fishes, he caught sight of himself, and turned to find the door to the kitchen. There he knocked, and asked for a piece of bread. The good-natured cook brought him in, and gave him an excellent breakfast, which the prince found nothing the worse for being served in the kitchen. While he ate, he talked with his entertainer, and learned that this was the favourite retreat of the Princess Daylight. But he learned nothing more, both because he was afraid of seeming inquisitive, and because the cook did not choose to be heard talking about her mistress to a peasant lad who had begged for his breakfast. As he rose to take his leave, It occurred to him that he might not be so far from the old woman's cottage as he had thought, and he asked the cook whether she knew anything of such a place, describing it as well as he could. She said she knew it well enough, adding with a smile, "It's there you're going, is it?" "Yes, if it's not far off." "It's not more than 3 miles. But mind what you are about, you know." "Why do you say that?" "If you're after any mischief, she'll make you repent it." "The best thing that could happen under the circumstances," remarked the prince. "What do you mean by that?" asked the cook. "Why, it stands to reason," answered the prince, "that if you wish to do anything wrong, the best thing for you is to be made to repent of it." "I see," said the cook. "Well, I think you may venture. She's a good old soul." "Which way does it lie from here?" asked the prince. She gave him full instructions, and he left her with many thanks. Being now refreshed, however, the prince did not go back to the cottage that day. He remained in the forest, amusing himself as best he could, but waiting anxiously for the night, in the hope that the princess would again appear. Nor was he disappointed, for, directly the moon rose, he spied a glimmering shape far across the glade. As it drew nearer, he saw it was she indeed, not dressed in white as before, in a pale blue like the sky. She looked lovelier still. He thought that it was that the blue suited her yet better than the white. He did not know that she was really more beautiful, because the moon was nearer the full. In fact, the next night was full moon, and the princess would then be at the zenith of her loveliness. The prince feared for some time that she was not coming near his hiding place that night, but the circles in her dance ever widened as the moon rose, until at last they embraced the whole glade, and she came still closer to the trees where he was hiding than she had come the night before. He was entranced with her loveliness, for it was indeed a marvellous thing. All night long he watched her, but dared not go near her. He would have been ashamed of watching her too, had he not become almost incapable of thinking of anything but how beautiful she was. He watched the whole night long, and saw that as the moon went down, she retreated in smaller and smaller circles, until at last he could see her no more. Weary as he was, he set out for the old woman's cottage, where he arrived just in time for her breakfast, which she shared with him. He then went to bed and slept for many hours. When he awoke, the sun was down, and he departed in great anxiety lest he should lose a glimpse of the lovely vision. But whether it was by the machinations of the swamp fairy, or merely that it was one thing to go and another to return by the same road, he lost his way. I shall not attempt to describe his misery when the moon rose, and he saw nothing but trees, trees, trees. She was high in the heavens before he reached the glade. Then indeed his troubles vanished, for there was the princess coming dancing towards him, in a dress that shone like gold, and with shoes that glimmered through the grass like fireflies. She was of course still more beautiful than before. Like an embodied sunbeam she passed him, and danced away into the distance. Before she returned in her circle, the clouds had begun to gather about the moon. The wind rose, the trees moaned, and their lighter branches leaned all one way before it. The prince feared that the princess would go in, and he should see her no more that night. But she came dancing on more jubilant than ever, her golden dress and her sunny hair streaming out upon the blast, waving her arms towards the moon, and in the exuberance of her delight ordering the clouds away from off her face. The prince could hardly believe she was not a creature of the elements after all. By the time she had completed another circle, the clouds had gathered deep, and there were growlings of distant thunder. Just as she passed the tree where he stood, a flash of lightning blinded him for a moment, and when he saw again, to his horror, the princess lay on the ground, he darted to her, thinking she had been struck, but when she heard him coming, she was on her feet in a moment. "What do you want?" she asked. "I beg your pardon. I thought the lightning," said the prince, hesitating. "There's nothing the matter," said the princess, waving him off rather haughtily. the poor prince turned and walked towards the wood. "Come back," said Daylight. "I like you. You do what you are told. Are you good?" "Not so good as I should like to be," said the prince. "Then go and grow better," said the princess. Again the disappointed prince turned and went. "Come back," said the princess. He obeyed, and stood before her waiting. "Can you tell me what the sun is like?" she asked. "No," he answered. "But where's the good of asking what you know?" "But I don't know," she rejoined. "Why, everybody knows." "That's the very thing. I'm not everybody. I've never seen the sun." "Then you can't know what it's like till you do see it." "I think you must be a prince," said the princess. "Do I look like one?" said the prince. "I can't quite say that." "Then why do you think so?" "Because you both do what you are told and speak the truth. Is the sun so very bright?" "As bright as the lightning." "But it doesn't go out like that, does it?" "Oh no, it shines like the moon, rises and sets like the moon, is much the same shape as the moon, only so bright that you can't look at it for a moment." "But I would look at it," said the princess. "But you couldn't," said the prince. "But I could," said the princess. "Why don't you then?" "Because I can't." "Why can't you?" "Because I can't wake. And I shall never wake until—" Here she hid her face in her hands, turned away, and walked in the slowest, stateliest manner towards the house. The prince ventured to follow her at a little distance, but she turned and made a repellent gesture, which, like a true gentleman prince, he obeyed at once. He waited a long time, but as she did not come near him again, and as the night had now cleared, he set off at last for the old woman's cottage. It was long past midnight when he reached it, but, to his surprise, the old woman was paring potatoes at the door. Fairies are fond of doing odd things. Indeed, however they may dissemble, the night is always their day, and so it is with all who have fairy blood in them. "Why, what are you doing there this time of the night, mother?" said the prince, for that was the kind way in which any young man in his country would address a woman who was much older than himself. "Getting your supper ready, my son," she answered. "Oh, I don't want any supper," said the prince. "Ah, you've seen daylight," said she. "I've seen a princess who never saw it," said the prince. "Do you like her?" asked the fairy. "Oh, don't I?" said the prince. "More than you would believe, mother." "A fairy can believe anything that ever was or ever could be," said the old woman. "Then are you a fairy?" asked the prince. "Yes," said she. "Then what do you do for things not to believe?" asked the prince. "There's plenty of them. Everything that never was, nor ever could be." "Plenty, I grant you," said the prince. "But do you believe there could be a princess who never saw the daylight? Do you believe that now?" This the prince said, not that he doubted the princess, but that he wanted the fairy to tell him more. She was too old a fairy, however, to be caught so easily. "Of all people, fairies must not tell secrets. Besides, she's a princess." "Well, I'll tell you a secret. I'm a prince." "I know that." "How do you know it?" "By the curl of the third eyelash on your left eyelid." "Which corner do you count from?" "That's a secret." "Another secret! Well, at least, if I am a prince, there can be no harm in telling me about a princess." "It's just the princes I can't tell." "There ain't any more of them, are there?" said the prince. "What! You don't think you're the only prince in the world, do you?" "Oh dear no! Not at all. but I know there's one too many just at present, except the princess. Yes, yes, that's it, said the fairy. What's it? asked the prince. But he could get nothing more out of the fairy, and had to go to bed unanswered, which was something of a trial. Now, wicked fairies will not be bound by the law which the good fairies obey, and this always seems to give the bad advantage over the good, for they use means to gain their ends which the others will not. But it is all of no consequence, for what they do never succeeds, nay, in the end it brings about the very thing they are trying to prevent. So you see that somehow, for all their cleverness, wicked fairies are dreadfully stupid, for, although from the beginning of the world they have really helped instead of thwarting the good fairies, not one of them is a bit wiser for it. She will try the bad thing just as they all did before her, and succeeds no better, of course. The prince had so far stolen a march upon the swamp fairy that she did not know he was in the neighbourhood until after he had seen the princess those 3 times. When she knew it, she consoled herself by thinking that the princess must be far too proud and too modest for any young man to venture even to speak to her before he had seen her 6 times at least. But there was even less danger than the wicked fairy thought, for, however much the princess might desire to be set free, she was dreadfully afraid of the wrong prince. Now, however, the fairy was going to do all she could. She so contrived it by her deceitful spells, that the next night the prince could not by any endeavour find his way to the glade. It would take me too long to tell her tricks. They would be amusing to us, who know that they could not do any harm, but they were something other than amusing to the poor prince. He wandered about the forest till daylight, and then fell fast asleep. The same thing occurred for 7 following days, during which neither could he find the good fairy's cottage. After the 3rd quarter of the moon, however, the bad fairy thought she might be at ease about the affair for a fortnight at least, for there was no chance of the prince wishing to kiss the princess during that period. So the 1st day of the 4th quarter he did find the cottage, and the next day he found the glade. For nearly another week he haunted it, but the princess never came. I have little doubt she was on the farther edge of it some part of every night, but at this period she always wore black, and, there being little or no light, the prince never saw her. Nor would he have known her if he had seen her. How could he have taken the worn, decrepit creature she was now for the glorious Princess Daylight? At last one night, when there was no moon at all, he ventured near the house. There he heard voices talking, although it was past midnight, for her women were in considerable uneasiness, because the one whose turn it was to watch her had fallen asleep, and had not seen which way she went, and this was a night when she would probably wander very far, describing a circle which did not touch the open glade at all, but stretched away from the back of the house deep into that side of the forest, a part of which the prince knew nothing. When he understood from what they said that she had disappeared, and that she must have gone somewhere in the said direction, he plunged at once into the wood to see if he could find her. For hours he roamed with nothing to guide him but the vague notion of a circle, which on one side bordered on the house, for so much he had picked up from the talk he had overheard. It was getting towards the dawn, but as yet there was no streak of light in the sky, when he came to a great birch tree, and sat down weary at the foot of it. While he sat, very miserable you may be sure, full of fear for the princess, and wondering how her attendants could take it so quietly, he bethought himself that it would not be a bad plan to light a fire, which, if she were anywhere near, would attract her. This he managed with a tinder box, which the good fairy had given him. It was just beginning to blaze up, when he heard a moan, which seemed to come from the other side of the tree. He sprung to his feet, but his heart throbbed so that he had to lean for a moment against the tree before he could move. When he got round, there lay a human form in a little dark heap on the earth. There was light enough from his fire to show that it was not the princess. He lifted it in his arms, hardly heavier than a child, and carried it to the flame. The countenance was that of an old woman, but it had a fearfully strange look. A black hood concealed her hair, and her eyes were closed. He laid her down as comfortably as he could, chafed her hands, put a little cordial from a bottle, also the gift of the fairy, into her mouth, took off his coat and wrapped it about her, and in short did the best he could. In a little while she opened her eyes and looked at him so pitifully. The tears rose and flowed from her grey wrinkled cheeks, but she said never a word. She closed her eyes again, but the tears kept on flowing, and her whole appearance was so utterly pitiful that the prince was near crying too. He begged her to tell him what was the matter, promising to do all he could to help her, but still she did not speak. He thought she was dying, and took her in his arms again to carry her to the princess's house, where he thought the good-natured cook might be able to do something for her. When he lifted her, the tears flowed yet faster, and she gave such a sad moan that it went to his very heart. "Mother, mother," he said, "poor mother," and kissed her on the withered lips. She started, and what eyes they were that opened upon him! But he did not see them, for it was still very dark, and he had enough to do to make his way through the trees towards the house. Just as he approached the door, feeling more tired than he could have imagined possible, she was such a little thin old thing, she began to move, and became so restless that, unable to carry her for a moment longer, he thought to lay her on the grass. But she stood upright on her feet. Her hood had dropped, and her hair fell about her. The first gleam of the morning was caught on her face. That face was bright as the never aging dawn, and her eyes were lovely as the sky of darkest blue. The prince recoiled in overmastering wonder. It was Daylight herself whom he had brought from the forest. He fell at her feet, nor dared to look up until she laid her hand upon his head. He rose then. "You kissed me when I was an old woman. There, I kiss you when I am a young princess," murmured Daylight. "Is that the sun coming?" End of chapter 28. Recording by Maricel Cui. Chapter 29 of At the Back of the North Wind. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. Chapter 29. Ruby. The children were delighted with the story, and made many amusing remarks upon it. Mr. Raymond promised to search his brain for another, and when he had found one, to bring it to them. Diamond, having taken leave of Nanny, and promised to go and see her again soon, went away with him. Now Mr. Raymond had been turning over in his mind what he could do both for Diamond and for Nanny. He had therefore made some acquaintance with Diamond's father, and had been greatly pleased with him, but he had come to the resolution, before he did anything so good as he would like to do for them, to put them all to a certain test. So as they walked away together, he began to talk with Diamond as follows. "Nanny must leave the hospital soon, Diamond." "I am glad of that, sir." "Why? Don't you think it's a nice place?" "Yes, very. But it's better to be well and doing something, you know, even if it's not quite so comfortable." "But they can't keep Nanny so long as they would like. They can't keep her till she's quite strong. There are always so many sick children they want to take in and make better. And the question is, what will she do when they send her out again?" "That's just what I can't tell, though I've been thinking of it over and over, sir. Her crossing was taken long ago, and I couldn't bear to see Nanny fighting for it, especially with such a poor fellow as has taken it. He's quite lame, sir." "She doesn't look much like fighting now, does she, Diamond?" "No, sir. She looks too like an angel. Angels don't fight, do they, sir?" "Not to get things for themselves, at least," said Mr. Diamond. "Besides," added Diamond, I don't quite see that she would have any better right to the crossing than the boy who has got it. Nobody gave it to her. She only took it, and now he has taken it." "If she were to sweep a crossing, soon at least, after the illness she has had, she would be laying up again, the very first wet day," said Mr. Diamond. "And there's hardly any money to be got except on wet days," remarked Diamond reflectively. "Is there nothing else she could do, sir?" "Not without being taught, I'm afraid." "Well, couldn't somebody teach her something?" "Couldn't you teach her, Diamond?" "I don't know anything myself, sir. I could teach her to dress the baby, but nobody would give her anything for doing things like that. They are so easy. There wouldn't be much good in teaching her to drive a cab, for where would she get the cab to drive? There ain't fathers and old Diamonds everywhere. At least, poor Nanny can't find any of them, I doubt." "Perhaps if she were taught to be nice and clean, and only speak gentle words." "Mother could teach her that," interrupted Diamond. "And to dress babies, and feed them, and take care of them," Mr. Raymond proceeded. "She might get a place as a nurse somewhere, you know. People do give money for that." "Then I'll ask mother," said Diamond. "But you'll have to give her her food then, and your father, not being strong, has enough to do already without that." "But here's me," said Diamond. "I'll help him out with it. When he's tired of driving, up I get. It don't make any difference to old Diamond. I don't mean he likes me as well as my father. Of course he can't, you know. Nobody could. But he does his duty all the same. It's got to be done, you know, sir. And Diamond's a good horse, isn't he, sir?" "From your description, I should say certainly. But I have not the pleasure of his acquaintance myself." "Don't you think he will go to heaven, sir?" "That I don't know anything about," said Mr. Raymond. "I confess I should be glad to think so," he added, smiling thoughtfully. "I'm sure he'll get to the back of the north wind anyhow," said Diamond to himself, but he had learned to be very careful of saying such things aloud. "Isn't it rather too much for him to go in the cab all day and every day?" resumed Mr. Raymond. "So father says when he feels his ribs of a morning. But then he says the old horse do eat well, and the moment he's had his supper, down he goes, and never gets up till he's called. And for the legs of him, father says that makes no end of a differ. Some horses, sir, they won't lie down all night long, but go to sleep on their four pins, like a haystack, father says. I think it's very stupid of them, and so does old Diamond. But then I suppose they don't know better, and so they can't help it. We mustn't be too hard upon them, father says." "Your father must be a good man, Diamond." Diamond looked up in Mr. Raymond's face, wondering what he could mean. "I said your father must be a good man, Diamond." "Of course," said Diamond. "How could he drive a cab if he wasn't?" "There are some men who drive cabs who are not very good," objected Mr. Raymond. Diamond remembered the drunken cabman, and saw that his friend was right. "Ah, but," he returned, "he must be, you know, with such a horse as old Diamond." "That does make a difference," said Mr. Raymond. "But it is quite enough that he is a good man without our trying to account for it. Now, if you like, I will give you a proof that I think him a good man. I am going away on the continent for a while, for 3 months, I believe, and I am going to let my house to a gentleman who does not want the use of my brougham. My horse is nearly as old, I fancy, as your Diamond, but I don't want to part with him, and I don't want him to be idle, for nobody, as you say, ought to be idle. But neither do I want him to be worked very hard. Now it has come into my head that perhaps your father would take charge of him, and work him under certain conditions." "My father will do what's right," said Diamond. "I'm sure of that." "Well, so I think. Will you ask him when he comes home to call and have a little chat with me to day some time?" "He must have his dinner first," said Diamond. "No, he's got his dinner with him to day. It must be after he's had his tea." Of course. Any time will do. I shall be at home all day." "Very well, sir. I will tell him. You may be sure he will come. My father thinks you a very kind gentleman, and I know he is right, for I know your very own self, sir." Mr. Raymond smiled, and as they had now reached his door, they parted, and Diamond went home. As soon as his father entered the house, Diamond gave him Mr. Raymond's message, and recounted the conversation that had preceded it. His father said little, but took thought sauce to his bread and butter, and as soon as he had finished his meal rose, saying, "I will go to your friend directly, Diamond. It would be a grand thing to get a little more money. We do want it." Diamond accompanied his father to Mr. Raymond's door, and there left him. He was shown at once into Mr. Raymond's study, where he gazed with some wonder at the multitude of books on the walls, and thought what a learned man Mr. Raymond must be. Presently Mr. Raymond entered, and after saying much the same about his old horse, made the following distinct proposal, one not over advantageous to Diamond's father, but for which he had reasons, namely that Joseph should have the use of Mr. Raymond's horse while he was away, on condition that he never worked him more than 6 hours a day, and fed him well, and that, besides, he should take Nanny home as soon as she was able to leave the hospital, and provide for her as one of his own children, neither better nor worse, so long, that is, as he had the horse. Diamond's father could not help thinking it a pretty close bargain. He should have both the girl and the horse to feed, and only 6 hours' work out of the horse. "It will save your own horse," said Mr. Raymond. "That is true," answered Joseph, "but all I can get by my own horse is only enough to keep us, and if I save him and feed your horse and the girl, don't you see, sir?" "Well, you can go home and think about it, and let me know by the end of the week. I am in no hurry before then." So Joseph went home and recounted the proposal to his wife, adding that he did not think there was much advantage to be got out of it. "Not much that way, husband," said Diamond's mother. "But there would be an advantage, and what matter who gets it?" "I don't see it," answered her husband. "Mr. Raymond is a gentleman of property, and I don't discover any much good in helping him to save a little more. He won't easily get one to make such a bargain, and I don't mean he shall get me. It would be a loss rather than a gain, I do think, at least if I took less work out of our own horse." 1 hour would make a difference to old Diamond, but that's not the main point. You must think what an advantage it would be to the poor girl that hasn't a home to go to. "She is one of Diamond's friends," thought his father. "I could be kind to her, you know," the mother went on, "and teach her housework and how to handle a baby. And besides, she would help me, and I should be the stronger for it, and able to do an odd bit of charing now and then when I got the chance." "I won't hear of that," said her husband. "Have the girl by all means. I'm ashamed I did not think of both sides of the thing at once. I wonder if the horse is a great eater. To be sure, if I gave Diamond 2 hours additional rest, it will be all the better for the old bones of him, and there would be 4 hours extra out of the other horse. That would give Diamond something to do every day. He could drive old Diamond after dinner, and I could take the other horse out for 6 hours after tea, or in the morning, as I found best. It might pay for the keep of both of them, that is, if I had good luck. I should like to oblige Mr. Raymond, though he be rather hard, for he has been very kind to our Diamond, wife, hasn't he now?" "He has indeed, Joseph," said his wife, and there the conversation ended. Diamond's father went the very next day to Mr. Raymond, and accepted his proposal, so that the week after, having got another stall in the same stable, he had 2 horses instead of 1. Oddly enough, the name of the new horse was Ruby, for he was a very red chestnut. Diamond's name came from a white lozenge on his forehead. Young Diamond said they were rich now, with such a big diamond and such a big ruby. End of chapter 29. Recording by Marisel Quee. Chapter 30 of At the Back of the North Wind. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. Chapter 30. Nanny's Dream. Nanny was not fit to be moved for some time yet, and Diamond went to see her as often as he could. But being more regularly engaged now, seeing he went out every day for a few hours with old Diamond, and had his baby to mind, and one of the horses to attend to, he could not go so often as he would have liked. One evening, as he sat by her bedside, she said to him, "I've had such a beautiful dream, Diamond. I should like to tell it to you." "Oh, do," said Diamond. "I'm so fond of dreams." "She must have been to the back of the north wind," he said to himself. "It was a very foolish dream, you know, but somehow it was so pleasant. What a good thing it is that you believe the dream all the time you are in it." My readers must not suppose that poor Nanny was able to say what she meant so well as I put it down here. She had never been to school, and had heard very little else than vulgar speech until she came to the hospital. But I have been to school, and although that could never make me able to dream so well as Nanny, it has made me able to tell her dream better than she could herself. And I am the more desirous of doing this for her, that I have already done the best I could for Diamond's dream, and it would be a shame to give the boy all the advantage. "I will tell you all I know about it," said Nanny. "The day before yesterday a lady came to see us, a very beautiful lady, and very beautifully dressed. I heard the matron say to her that it was very kind of her to come in blue and gold, and she answered that she knew we didn't like dull colours. She had such a lovely shawl on, just like redness dipped in milk, and all worked over with flowers of the same colour. It didn't shine much, it was silk, but it kept in the shine. When she came to my bedside she sat down, just where you are sitting, Diamond, and laid her hand on the counterpane. I was sitting up, with my table before me ready for my tea. Her hand looked so pretty in its blue glove that I was tempted to stroke it. I thought she wouldn't be angry, for everybody that comes to the hospital is kind. It's only in the streets they ain't kind. But she drew her hand away, and I almost cried, for I thought I had been rude. Instead of that, however, it was only that she didn't like giving me her glove to stroke, for she drew it off, and then laid her hand where it was before. I wasn't sure, but I ventured to put out my ugly hand." "Your hand ain't ugly, Nanny," said Diamond, but Nanny went on. "And I stroked it again, and then she stroked mine. Think of that! And there was a ring on her finger, and I looked down to see what it was like, and she drew it off and put it upon one of my fingers. It was a red stone, and she told me they called it a ruby." "Oh, that is funny," said Diamond. "Our new horse is called Ruby. We've got another horse, a red one, such a beauty." But Nanny went on with her story. "I looked at the ruby all the time the lady was talking to me. It was so beautiful. And as she talked I kept seeing deeper and deeper into the stone. At last she rose to go away, and I began to pull the ring off my finger. And what do you think she said? 'Wear it all night if you like, only you must take care of it. I can't give it to you, for some one gave it to me, but you may keep it till tomorrow.' Wasn't it kind of her? I could hardly take my tea, I was so delighted to hear it. And I do think it was the ring that set me dreaming, for, after I had taken my tea, I leaned back, half lying and half sitting, and looked at the ring on my finger. By degrees I began to dream. The ring grew larger and larger, until at last I found that I was not looking at a red stone, but at a red sunset, which shone in at the end of a long street near where Granny lives. I was dressed in rags as I used to be, and I had great holes in my shoes, at which the nasty mud came through to my feet. I didn't use to mind it before, but now I thought it horrid. And there was the great red sunset, with streaks of green and gold between, standing looking at me. Why couldn't I live in the sunset instead of that dirt? Why was it so far away always? Why did it never come into our wretched street? It faded away, as the sunsets always do, and at last went out altogether. Then a cold wind began to blow and flutter all my rags about." "That was the North Wind herself," said Diamond. "Eh?" said Nanny, and went on with her story. "I turned my back to it, and wandered away. I did not know where I was going, only it was warmer to go that way. I don't think it was a north wind, for I found myself in the West End at last. But it doesn't matter in a dream which wind it was." "I don't know that," said Diamond. "I believe North Wind can get into our dreams, yes, and blow in them. Sometimes she has blown me out of a dream altogether." "I don't know what you mean, Diamond," said Nanny. "Never mind," answered Diamond. "Two people can't always understand each other. They'd both be at the back of the north wind directly, and what would become of the other places without them?" "You do talk so oddly," said Nanny. "I sometimes think they must have been right about you." "What did they say about me?" asked Diamond. "They called you God's baby." "How kind of them! But I knew that." "Did you know what it meant, though? It meant that you were not right in the head." "I feel all right," said Diamond, putting both hands to his head as if it had been a globe he could take off and set on again. "Well, as long as you are pleased, I am pleased," said Nanny. "Thank you, Nanny. Do go on with your story. I think I like dreams even better than fairy tales, but they must be nice ones, like yours, you know." "Well, I went on, keeping my back to the wind, until I came to a fine street on the top of a hill. How it happened I don't know, but the front door of one of the houses was open, and not only the front door, but the back door as well, so that I could see right through the house. And what do you think I saw? A garden place with green grass, and the moon shining upon it. Think of that! There was no moon in the street, but through the house there was the moon. I looked, and there was nobody near. I would not do any harm, and the grass was so much nicer than the mud. But I couldn't think of going on the grass with such dirty shoes. I kicked them off in the gutter, and ran in on my bare feet, up the steps, and through the house, and on to the grass, and the moment I came into the moonlight, I began to feel better." "That's why North Wind blew you there," said Diamond. "It came of Mr. Raymond's story about Princess Daylight," returned Nanny. "Well, I lay down upon the grass in the moonlight, without thinking how I was to get out again. Somehow the moon suited me exactly. There was not a breath of the north wind you talk about. It was quite gone." "You didn't want her any more just then. She never goes where she's not wanted," said Diamond. "But she blew you into the moonlight anyhow." "Well, we won't dispute about it," said Nanny. "You've got a tile loose, you know." "Suppose I have," returned Diamond. "Don't you see it may let in the moonlight, or the sunlight for that matter?" "Perhaps yes, perhaps no," said Nanny. "And you've got your dreams too, Nanny." "Yes, but I know they're dreams." "So do I, but I know besides they are something more as well." "Oh, do you?" rejoined Nanny. "I don't." "All right," said Diamond. "Perhaps you will some day." "Perhaps I won't," said Nanny. Diamond held his peace, and Nanny resumed her story. "I lay a long time, and the moonlight got in at every tear in my clothes, and made me feel so happy." "There, I tell you," said Diamond. "What do you tell me?" returned Nanny. "North Wind." "It was the moonlight, I tell you," persisted Nanny, and again Diamond held his peace. "All at once I felt that the moon was not shining so strong. I looked up, and there was a cloud, all crapey and fluffy, trying to drown the beautiful creature. But the moon was so round, just like a whole plate, that the cloud couldn't stick to her. She shook it off, and sat there and shone out clearer and brighter than ever. But up came a thicker cloud, and 'You shan't,' said the moon, and 'I will,' said the cloud. But it couldn't. Out shone the moon, quite laughing at its impudence. I knew her ways, for I've always been used to watch her. She's the only thing worth looking at in our street at night." "Don't call it your street," said Diamond. "You're not going back to it. You're coming to us, you know." "That's too good to be true," said Nanny. "There are very few things good enough to be true," said Diamond, "but I hope this is. Too good to be true it can't be. Isn't true good? And isn't good good? And how then can anything be too good to be true? That's like old Sal to say that." "Don't abuse Grannie, Diamond. She's a horrid old thing, she and her gin bottle. But she'll repent some day, and then you'll be glad not to have said anything against her." "Why?" said Diamond. "Because you'll be sorry for her." "I am sorry for her now." "Very well, that's right. She'll be sorry too, and there'll be an end of it." "All right. You come to us," said Diamond. "Where was I?" said Nanny. "Telling me how the moon served the clouds." "Yes, but it wouldn't do, all of it. Up came the clouds, and they came faster and faster until the moon was covered up. You couldn't expect her to throw off 100 of them at once, could you?" "Certainly not," said Diamond. "So it grew very dark, and a dog began to yelp in the house. I looked and saw that the door to the garden was shut. Presently it was opened, not to let me out, but to let the dog in, yelping and bounding. I thought if he caught sight of me, I was in for a biting first, and the police after. So I jumped up and ran for a little summer house in the corner of the garden. The dog came after me, but I shut the door in his face. It was well it had a door, wasn't it?" "You dreamed of the door because you wanted it," said Diamond. "No, I didn't. It came of itself. It was there in the true dream." "There! I've caught you," said Diamond. "I knew you believed in the dream as much as I do." "Oh, well, if you will lay traps for a body," said Nanny. "Anyhow, I was safe inside a summer house, and what do you think? There was the moon beginning to shine again, but only through one of the panes, and that one was just the colour of the ruby. Wasn't it funny?" "No, not a bit funny," said Diamond. "If you will be contrary," said Nanny. "No, no," said Diamond. "I only meant that was the very pane I should have expected her to shine through." "Oh, very well," returned Nanny. What Diamond meant I do not pretend to say. He had curious notions about things. "And now," said Nanny, "I didn't know what to do, for the dog kept barking at the door, and I couldn't get out. But the moon was so beautiful that I couldn't keep from looking at it through the red pane, and as I looked it got larger and larger till it filled the whole pane and outgrew it, so that I could see it through the other panes, and it grew till it filled them too, and the whole window, so that the summer house was nearly as bright as day. The dog stopped barking, and I heard a gentle tapping at the door, like the wind blowing a little branch against it." "Just like her," said Diamond, who thought everything strange and beautiful must be done by North Wind. "So I turned from the window and opened the door, and what do you think I saw?" "A beautiful lady," said Diamond. "No, the moon itself, as big as a little house, and as round as a ball, shining like yellow silver. It stood on the grass, down on the very grass. I could see nothing else for the brightness of it, and as I stared and wondered, a door opened in the side of it near the ground, and a curious little old man, with a crooked thing over his shoulder, looked out and said, 'Come along, Nanny, my lady wants you. We're come to fetch you.' I wasn't a bit frightened. I went up to the beautiful bright thing, and the old man held down his hand, and I took hold of it and gave a jump, and he gave me a lift, and I was inside the moon. And what do you think it was like? It was such a pretty little house, with blue windows and white curtains. At one of the windows sat a beautiful lady, with her head leaning on her hand, looking out. She seemed rather sad, and I was sorry for her, and stood staring at her. "You didn't think I had such a beautiful mistress as that?" said the queer little man. "No, indeed," I answered. "Who would have thought it?" "Ah, who indeed? But you see you don't know everything." The little man closed the door, and began to pull at a rope which hung behind it with a weight at the end. After he had pulled a while, he said, "There, that will do. We're all right now." Then he took me by the hand and opened a little trap in the floor, and led me down 2 or 3 steps, and I saw like a great hole below me. "Don't be frightened," said the little man. "It's not a hole. It's only a window. Put your face down and look through." I did as he told me, and there was the garden and the summer house far away, lying at the bottom of the moonlight. "There," said the little man, "we've brought you off. Do you see the little dog barking at us down there in the garden?" I told him I couldn't see anything so far. "Can you see anything so small and so far off?" I said. "Bless you, child," said the little man, "I could pick up a needle out of the grass if I had only a long enough arm. There's one lying by the door of the summer house now." I looked at his eyes. They were very small, but so bright that I think he saw by the light that went out of them. Then he took me up and up again by a little stair in a corner of the room, and through another trap door, and there was one great round window above us, and I saw the blue sky and the clouds, and such lots of stars, all so big and shining as hard as ever they could. "The little girl angels had been polishing them," said Diamond. "What nonsense you do talk!" said Nanny. "But my nonsense is just as good as yours, Nanny. When you have done, I'll tell you my dream. The stars are in it. Not the moon, though. She was away somewhere. Perhaps she was gone to fetch you then. I don't think that, though, for my dream was longer ago than yours. She might have been to fetch some one else, though, for we can't fancy it's only us that get such fine things done for them. But do tell me what came next." Perhaps one of my child readers may remember whether the moon came down to fetch him or her the same night that Diamond had his dream. I cannot tell, of course. I know she did not come to fetch me, though I did think I could make her follow me when I was a boy, not a very tiny one either. The little man took me all round the house, and made me look out of every window. Oh, it was beautiful! There we were, all up in the air, in such a nice clean little house. "Your work will be to keep the windows bright," said the little man. "You won't find it very difficult, for there ain't much dust up here, only the frost settles on them sometimes, and the drops of rain leave marks on them." "I can easily clean them inside," I said. "But how am I to get the frost and rain off the outside of them?" "Oh," he said, "it's quite easy. There are ladders all about. You've only got to go out at the door and climb about. There are a great many windows you haven't seen yet, and some of them look into places you don't know anything about. I used to clean them myself, but I'm getting rather old, you see, ain't I now?" "I can't tell," I answered. "You see, I never saw you when you were younger." "Never saw the man in the moon?" said he. "Not very near," I answered. "Not to tell how young or how old he looked. I have seen the bundle of sticks on his back, for Jim had pointed that out to me. Jim was very fond of looking at the man in the moon. Poor Jim! I wonder he hasn't been to see me. I'm afraid he's ill too." "I'll try to find out," said Diamond, "and let you know." "Thank you," said Nanny. "You and Jim ought to be friends." "But what did the man in the moon say when you told him you had seen him with a bundle of sticks on his back?" "He laughed, but I thought he looked offended too. His little nose turned up sharper, and he drew the corners of his mouth down from the tips of his ears into his neck. But he didn't look cross, you know." "Didn't he say anything?" "Oh yes, he said, 'That's all nonsense. What you saw was my bundle of dusters. I was going to clean the windows. It takes a good many, you know. Really, what do they say of their superiors down there? It's only because they don't know better,' I ventured to say. 'Of course, said the little man. "Nobody ever does know better. Well, I forgive them, and that sets it all right, I hope.' 'It's very good of you,' I said. 'No,' said he, 'it's not in the least good of me. I couldn't be comfortable otherwise.' After this he said nothing for a while, and I laid myself on the floor of his garret, and stared up and around at the great blue beautifulness. I had forgotten him almost, when at last he said, "Ain't you done yet?" "Done what?" I asked. "Done saying your prayers," says he. "I wasn't saying my prayers," I answered. "Oh yes, you were," said he. though you didn't know it. And now I must show you something else." He took my hand and led me down the stair again, and through a narrow passage, and through another and another and another. I don't know how there could be room for so many passages in such a little house. The heart of it must be ever so much farther from the sides than they are from each other. How could it have an inside that was so independent of its outside? There's the point. It was funny, wasn't it, Diamond? "No," said Diamond. He was going to say that was very much the sort of thing at the back of the north wind, but he checked himself, and only added, "All right, I don't see it. I don't see why the inside should depend on the outside. It ain't so with the crabs. They creep out of their outsides and make new ones. Mr. Raymond told me so." "I don't see what that has got to do with it," said Nanny. "Then go on with your story, please," said Diamond. "What did you come to after going through all those winding passages into the heart of the moon?" "I didn't say they were winding passages. I said they were long and narrow. They didn't wind. They went by corners." "That's worth knowing," remarked Diamond, "for who knows how soon he may have to go there. But the main thing is, what did you come to at last?" "We came to a small box against the wall of a tiny room. The little man told me to put my ear against it. I did so, and heard a noise, something like the purring of a cat, only not so loud, and much sweeter." "What is it?" I asked. "Don't you know the sound?" returned the little man. "No," I answered. "Don't you know the sound of bees?" he said. I had never heard bees, and could not know the sound of them. "Those are my lady's bees," he went on. "I had heard that bees gather honey from the flowers." "But where are the flowers for them?" I asked. "My lady's bees gather their honey from the sun and the stars," said the little man. "Do let me see them," I said. "No, I daren't do that," he answered. "I have no business with them. I don't understand them. Besides, they are so bright that if one were to fly into your eye, it would blind you altogether." "Then you have seen them?" "Oh yes, once or twice, I think. But I don't quite know. They are so very bright, like buttons of lightning. Now I've shown you all I can to night, and we'll go back to the room." I followed him, and he made me sit down under a lamp that hung from the roof, and gave me some bread and honey. The lady had never moved. She sat with her forehead leaning on her hand, gazing out of the little window, hung like the rest with white cloudy curtains. From where I was sitting I looked out of it too, but I could see nothing. Her face was very beautiful, and very white, and very still, and her hand was as white as the forehead that leaned on it. I did not see her whole face, only the side of it, for she never moved to turn it full upon me, or even to look at me. How long I sat after I had eaten my bread and honey, I don't know. The little man was busy about the room, pulling a string here and a string there, but chiefly the string at the back of the door. I was thinking with some uneasiness that he would soon be wanting me to go out and clean the windows, and I didn't fancy the job. At last he came up to me with a great armful of dusters. "It's time you set about the windows," he said, "for there's rain coming, and if they're quite clean before, then the rain can't spoil them." I got up at once. "You needn't be afraid," he said. "You won't tumble off. Only you must be careful. Always hold on with one hand while you rub with the other." As he spoke he opened the door. I started back in a terrible fright, for there was nothing but blue air to be seen under me, like a great water without a bottom at all. But what must be must, and to live up here was so much nicer than down in the mud with holes in my shoes, that I never thought of not doing as I was told. The little man showed me how and where to lay hold while I put my foot round the edge of the door on to the first round of a ladder. "Once you're up," he said, "you'll see how you have to go well enough." I did as he told me, and crept out very carefully. Then the little man handed me the bundle of dusters, saying, "I always carry them on my reaping hook, but I don't think you can manage it properly. You shall have it if you like." I wouldn't take it, however, for it looked dangerous. I did the best I could with the dusters, and crawled up to the top of the moon. But what a grand sight it was! The stars were all over my head, so bright and so near that I could almost have laid hold of them. The round ball to which I clung went bobbing and floating away through the dark blue above and below and on every side. It was so beautiful that all fear left me, and I set to work diligently. I cleaned window after window. At length I came to a very little one, in at which I peeped. There was the room with a box of bees in it. I laid my ear to the window and heard the musical hum quite distinctly. A great longing to see them came upon me, and I opened the window and crept in. The little box had a door like a closet. I opened it the tiniest crack, when out came the light, with such a sting that I closed it again in terror. Not, however, before 3 bees had shot out into the room, where they darted about like flashes of lightning. Terribly frightened, I tried to get out of the window again, but I could not. There was no way to the outside of the moon but through the door, and that was in the room where the lady sat. No sooner had I reached the room than the 3 bees which had followed me flew at once to the lady and settled upon her hair. Then first I saw her move. She started, put up her hand and caught them, then rose and, having held them into the flame of the lamp one after the other, turned to me. Her face was not so sad now as stern. It frightened me much. "Nanny, you have got me into trouble," she said. "You have been letting out my bees, which it is all I can do to manage. You have forced me to burn them. It is a great loss, and there will be a storm." As she spoke, the clouds had gathered all about us. I could see them come crowding up white about the windows. "I am sorry to find," said the lady, "that you are not to be trusted. You must go home again. You won't do for us." Then came a great clap of thunder, and the moon rocked and swayed. All grew dark about me, and I fell on the floor and lay half stunned. I could hear everything but could see nothing. "Shall I throw her out of the door, my lady?" said a little man. "No," she answered. "She's not quite bad enough for that. I don't think there's much harm in her, only she'll never do for us. She would make dreadful mischief up here. She's only fit for the mud. It's a great pity. I am sorry for her. Just take that ring off her finger. I am sadly afraid she has stolen it." The little man caught hold of my hand, and I felt him tugging at the ring. I tried to speak what was true about it, but, after a terrible effort, only gave a groan. Other things began to come into my head. Somebody else had a hold of me. The little man wasn't there. I opened my eyes at last and saw the nurse. I had cried out in my sleep, and she had come and waked me. But, Diamond, for all it was only a dream, I cannot help being ashamed of myself yet for opening the lady's box of bees. "You wouldn't do it again, would you, if she were to take you back?" said Diamond. "No, I don't think anything would ever make me do it again. But where's the good? I shall never have the chance." "I don't know that," said Diamond. "You silly baby, it was only a dream," said Nanny. "I know that, Nanny dear, but how can you tell you mayn't dream it again?" "That's not a bit likely." "I don't know that," said Diamond. "You're always saying that," said Nanny. "I don't like it." "Then I won't say it again, if I don't forget," said Diamond. "But it was such a beautiful dream, wasn't it, Nanny? What a pity you opened that door and let the bees out. You might have had such a long dream, and such nice talks with the moon lady. Do try to go again, Nanny. I do so want to hear more." But now the nurse came and told him it was time to go, and Diamond went, saying to himself, "I can't help thinking that North Wind had something to do with that dream. It would be tiresome to lie there all day and all night too, without dreaming. Perhaps if she hadn't done that, the moon might have carried her to the back of the North Wind. Who knows?" End of chapter 30. Recording by Mary Selquy. Chapter 31 of At the Back of the North Wind. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. Chapter 31. The North Wind doth blow. It was a great delight to Diamond when at length Nanny was well enough to leave the hospital and go home to their house. She was not very strong yet, but Diamond's mother was very considerate of her, and took care that she should have nothing to do she was not quite fit for. If Nanny had been taken straight from the street, it is very probable she would not have been so pleasant in a decent household, or so easy to teach. But after the refining influences of her illness, and the kind treatment she had had in the hospital, she moved about the house just like some rather sad pleasure haunting the mind. As she got better, and the colour came back to her cheeks, her step grew lighter and quicker, her smile shone out more readily, and it became certain that she would soon be a treasure of help. It was great fun to see Diamond teaching her how to hold the baby, and wash and dress him, and often they laughed together over her awkwardness. But she had not many such lessons before she was able to perform those duties quite as well as Diamond himself. Things, however, did not go well with Joseph from the very arrival of Ruby. It almost seemed as if the red beast had brought ill luck with him. The fares were fewer, and the pay less. Ruby's services did indeed make the week's income at first a little beyond what it used to be, but then there were 2 more to feed. After the first month he fell lame, and for the whole of the next Joseph dared not attempt to work him. I cannot say that he never grumbled, for his own health was far from what it had been, but I can say that he tried to do his best. During all that month they lived on very short commons indeed, seldom tasting meat except on Sundays, and poor old Diamond, who worked the hardest of all, not even then, so that at the end of it he was as thin as a clothes horse, while Ruby was as plump and sleek as a bishop's cob. Nor was it much better after Ruby was able to work again, for it was a season of great depression in business, and that is very soon felt amongst the cabmen. City men look more after their shillings, and their wives and daughters have less to spend. It was besides a wet autumn, and bread rose greatly in price. When I add to this that Diamond's mother was but poorly, for a new baby was coming, you will see that these were not very jolly times for our friends in the mews. Notwithstanding the depressing influences around him, Joseph was able to keep a little hope alive in his heart, and when he came home at night, would get Diamond to read to him, and would also make Nanny produce her book, that he might see how she was getting on. For Diamond had taken her education in hand, and as she was a clever child, she was very soon able to put letters and words together. Thus the 3 months passed away, but Mr. Raymond did not return. Joseph had been looking anxiously for him, chiefly with the desire of getting rid of Ruby. Not that he was absolutely of no use to him, but that he was a constant weight upon his mind. Indeed, as far as provision went, he was rather worse off with Ruby and Nanny than he had been before. But on the other hand, Nanny was a great help in the house, and it was a comfort to him to think that when the new baby did come, Nanny would be with his wife. Of God's gifts a baby is of the greatest, therefore it is no wonder that when this one came, she was as heartily welcomed by the little household as if she had brought plenty with her. Of course she made a great difference in the work to be done, far more difference than her size warranted, but Nanny was no end of help, and Diamond was as much of a sunbeam as ever, and began to sing to the new baby the first moment he got her in his arms. But he did not sing the same songs to her that he had sung to his brother, for, he said, she was a new baby and must have new songs, and besides, she was a sister baby and not a brother baby, and of course would not like the same kind of songs. Where the difference in his songs lay, however, I do not pretend to be able to point out. One thing I am sure of, that they not only had no small share in the education of the little girl, but helped the whole family a great deal more than they were aware. How they managed to get through the long, dreary, expensive winter, I can hardly say. Sometimes things were better, sometimes worse. But at last the spring came, and the winter was over and gone, and that was much. Still Mr. Raymond did not return, and although the mother would have been able to manage without Nanny now, they could not look for a place for her so long as they had Ruby, and they were not altogether sorry for this. 1 week at last was worse than they had yet had. They were almost without bread before it was over. But the sadder he saw his father and mother looking, the more Diamond set himself to sing to the 2 babies. One thing which had increased their expenses was that they had been forced to hire another little room for Nanny. When the second baby came, Diamond gave up his room that Nanny might be at hand to help his mother, and went to hers, which, although a fine place to what she had been accustomed to, was not very nice in his eyes. He did not mind the change though, for was not his mother the more comfortable for it? And was not Nanny more comfortable too? And indeed, was not Diamond himself more comfortable that other people were more comfortable? And if there was more comfort every way, the change was a happy one. End of chapter 31. Recording by Marisel Cui. Chapter 32 of At the Back of the North Wind. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. Chapter 32. Diamond and Ruby. It was Friday night, and Diamond, like the rest of the household, had had very little to eat that day. The mother would always pay the week's rent before she laid out anything even on food. His father had been very gloomy, so gloomy that he had actually been cross to his wife. It is a strange thing, how the pain of seeing the suffering of those we love will sometimes make us add to their suffering by being cross with them. This comes of not having faith enough in God, and shows how necessary this faith is, for when we lose it, we lose even the kindness which alone can soothe the suffering. Diamond, in consequence, had gone to bed very quiet and thoughtful, a little troubled indeed. It had been a very stormy winter, and even now that the spring had come, the north wind often blew. When Diamond went to his bed, which was in a tiny room in the roof, he heard it like the sea moaning, and when he fell asleep he still heard the moaning. All at once he said to himself, "Am I awake or am I asleep?" But he had no time to answer the question, for there was North Wind calling him. His heart beat very fast. It was such a long time since he had heard that voice. He jumped out of bed, and looked everywhere, but could not see her. "Diamond, come here," she said again and again, but where the here was he could not tell. To be sure, the room was all but quite dark, and she might be close beside him. "Dear North Wind," said Diamond, "I want so much to go to you, but I can't tell where." "Come here, Diamond," was all her answer. Diamond opened the door and went out of the room, and down the stair and into the yard. His little heart was in a flutter, for he had long given up all thought of seeing her again. Neither now was he to see her. When he got out, a great puff of wind came against him, and in obedience to it, he turned his back and went as it blew. It blew him right up to the stable door, and went on blowing. "She wants me to go into the stable," said Diamond to himself, "but the door is locked." He knew where the key was, in a certain hole in the wall, far too high for him to get at. He ran to the place, however. Just as he reached it, there came a wild blast, and down fell the key clanging on the stones at his feet. He picked it up, and ran back and opened the stable door, and went in. And what do you think he saw? A little light came through the dusty window from a gas lamp, sufficient to show him Diamond and Ruby, with their 2 heads up, looking at each other across the partition of their stalls. The light showed the white mark on Diamond's forehead, but Ruby's eye shone so bright that he thought more light came out of it than went in. This is what he saw. But what do you think he heard? He heard the 2 horses talking to each other in a strange language which yet, somehow or other, he could understand, and turn over in his mind in English. The first words he heard were from Diamond, who apparently had been already quarrelling with Ruby. "Look how fat you are, Ruby," said old Diamond. "You are so plump, and your skin shines so, you ought to be ashamed of yourself." "There's no harm in being fat," said Ruby in a deprecating tone. "No, nor in being sleek. I may as well shine as not." "No harm!" retorted Diamond. "Is it no harm to go eating up all poor master's oats, and taking up so much of his time grooming you, when you only work 6 hours? No, not 6 hours a day, and, as I hear, get along no faster than a big dray horse with 2 tons behind him? So they tell me." "Your master's not mine," said Ruby. "I must attend to my own master's interests, and eat all that is given me, and be sleek and fat as I can, and go no faster than I need." "Now really, if the rest of the horses weren't all asleep, poor things, they work till they're tired, I do believe they would get up and kick you out of the stable. You make me ashamed of being a horse. You dare to say my master ain't your master. That's your gratitude for the way he feeds you and spares you. Pray, where would your carcass be if it weren't for him?" "He doesn't do it for my sake. If I were his own horse, he would work me as hard as he does you." "And I'm proud to be so worked. I wouldn't be as fat as you, not for all you're worth. You're a disgrace to the stable. Look at the horse next you. He's something like a horse, all skin and bone, and his master ain't over kind to him either. He put a stinging lash on his whip last week, but that old horse knows he's got a wife and children to keep, as well as his drunken master, and he works like a horse. I dare say he grudges his master the beer he drinks, but I don't believe he grudges anything else." "Well, I don't grudge yours what he gets by me," said Ruby. "Gets!" retorted Diamond. "What he gets isn't worth grudging. It comes next to nothing, what with your fat and shine." "Well, at least you ought to be thankful you're the better for it. You get a 2 hours' rest a day out of it." "I thank my master for that, not you, you lazy fellow. You go along like a buttock of beef upon castors, you do." "Ain't you afraid I'll kick if you go on like that, Diamond?" "Kick! You couldn't kick if you tried. You might heave your rump up half a foot, but for lashing out, ho ho! If you did, you'd be down on your belly before you could get your legs under you again. It's my belief, once out, they'd stick out for ever. Talk of kicking! Why don't you put one foot before the other now and then when you're in the cab? The abuse master gets for your sake is quite shameful. No decent horse would bring it on him. Depend upon it, Ruby, no cabman likes to be abused any more than his fare. But his fares, at least when you are between the shafts, are very much to be excused. Indeed they are." "Well, you see, Diamond, I don't want to go lame again." "I don't believe you were so very lame after all. There." "Oh, but I was." "Then I believe it was all your own fault. I'm not lame. I never was lame in all my life. You don't take care of your legs. You never lay them down at night. There you are with your huge carcass crushing down your poor legs all night long. You don't even care for your own legs. So long as you can eat, eat, and sleep, sleep. You, a horse indeed!" "But I tell you I was lame." "I'm not denying there was a puffy look about your off pastern, but my belief is it wasn't even grease. It was fat. I tell you I put my foot on one of those horrid stones they make the roads with, and it gave my ankle such a twist." "Ankle, indeed! Why should you ape your betters? Horses ain't got any ankles. They're only pasterns, and so long as you don't lift your feet better, but fall asleep between every step, You'll run a good chance of laming all your ankles, as you call them, one after another. It's not your lively horse that comes to grief in that way. I tell you I believe it wasn't much, and if it was your own fault. There, I've done. I'm going to sleep. I'll try to think as well of you as I can, if you would but step out a bit and run off a little of your fat." Here Diamond began to double up his knees, but Ruby spoke again, and, as young Diamond thought, in a rather different tone. "I say, Diamond, I can't bear to have an honest old horse like you think of me like that. I will tell you the truth. It was my own fault that I fell lame." "I told you so," returned the other, tumbling against the partition, as he rolled over on his side to give his legs every possible privilege in the narrow circumstances. "I meant to do it, Diamond." At the words, the old horse arose with a scramble like thunder, shot his angry head and glaring eye over into Ruby's stall, and said, "Keep out of my way, you unworthy wretch, or I'll bite you. You, a horse! Why did you do that?" "Because I wanted to grow fat." "You grease tub! Oh, my teeth and tail! I thought you were a humbug. Why did you want to get fat? There's no truth to be got out of you but by cross-questioning. You ain't fit to be a horse." "Because once I am fat, my nature is to keep fat for a long time, and I didn't know when master might come home and want to see me." "You conceited, good-for-nothing brute! You're only fit for the knacker's yard. You wanted to look handsome, did you? Hold your tongue, or I'll break my halter and be at you, with your handsome fat." "Never mind, Diamond. You're a good horse. You can't hurt me." "Can't hurt you? Just let me once try." "No, you can't." "Why then?" "Because I'm an angel." "What's that?" "Of course you don't know." "Indeed I don't." "I know you don't. An ignorant, rude, old human horse like you couldn't know it. But there's young Diamond listening to all we're saying, and he knows well enough there are horses in heaven for angels to ride upon, as well as other animals, lions and eagles and bulls, in more important situations. The horses the angels ride must be angel horses, else the angels couldn't ride upon them. Well, I'm one of them." "You ain't." "Did you ever know a horse tell a lie?" "Never before. But you've confessed to shamming lame." "Nothing of the sort. It was necessary I should grow fat, and necessary that good Joseph, your master, should grow lean. I could have pretended to be lame, but that no horse, least of all an angel horse, would do. So I must be lame, and so I sprained my ankle. For the angel horses have ankles. They don't talk horse slang up there. And it hurt me very much, I assure you, Diamond, though you mayn't be good enough to be able to believe it." Old Diamond made no reply. He had lain down again, and a sleepy snort, very like a snore, revealed that, if he was not already asleep, he was past understanding a word that Ruby was saying. When young Diamond found this, he thought he might venture to take up the dropped shuttlecock of the conversation. "I'm good enough to believe it, Ruby," he said. But Ruby never turned his head or took any notice of him. I suppose he did not understand more of English than just what the coachman and stableman were in the habit of addressing him with. Finding, however, that his companion made no reply, he shot his head over the partition, and looking down at him, said, "You just wait till to-morrow, and you'll see whether I'm speaking the truth or not. I declare the old horse is fast asleep. Diamond! No, I won't." Ruby turned away and began pulling at his hayrack in silence. Diamond gave a shiver, and looking round saw that the door of the stable was open. He began to feel as if he had been dreaming, and after a glance about the stable to see if North Wind was anywhere visible, he thought he had better go back to bed. Chapter 32. Chapter 33 of At the Back of the North Wind. At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. Chapter 33. The Prospect Brightens. The next morning Diamond's mother said to his father, "I'm not quite comfortable about that child again." "Which child, Martha?" asked Joseph. "You've got a choice now." "Well, Diamond, I mean. I'm afraid he's getting into his queer ways again. He's been at his old trick of walking in his sleep. I saw him run up the stair in the middle of the night." "Didn't you go after him, wife?" "Of course I did, and found him fast asleep in his bed. It's because he's had so little meat for the last 6 weeks, I'm afraid." "It may be that. I'm very sorry. But if it don't please God to send us enough, what am I to do, wife?" "You can't help it, I know, my dear good man," returned Martha. "And after all, I don't know. I don't see why he shouldn't get on as well as the rest of us. There I'm nursing baby all this time, and I get along pretty well. I'm sure, to hear the little man singing, you wouldn't think there was much amiss with him." For at that moment Diamond was singing like a lark in the clouds. He had the new baby in his arms, while his mother was dressing herself. Joseph was sitting at his breakfast, a little weak tea, dry bread, and very dubious butter, which Nanny had set for him, and which he was enjoying because he was hungry. He had groomed both horses, and had got old Diamond harnessed, ready to put to. "Think of a fat angel, Dulcimer!" said Diamond. The baby had not been christened yet, but Diamond, in reading his Bible, had come upon the word Dulcimer, and thought it so pretty that ever after he called his sister Dulcimer. "Think of a red fat angel, Dulcimer," he repeated. "For Ruby's an angel of a horse, Dulcimer. He sprained his ankle and got fat on purpose." "What purpose, Diamond?" asked his father. "Ah, that I can't tell. I suppose to look handsome when his master comes," answered Diamond. "What do you think, Dulcimer? It must be for some good, for Ruby's an angel." "I wish I were rid of him anyhow," said his father, "for he weighs heavy on my mind." "No wonder, father, he's so fat," said Diamond. "But you needn't be afraid, for everybody says he's in better condition than when you had him." "Yes, but he may be as thin as a tin horse before his owner comes. It was too bad to leave him on my hands this way." "Perhaps he couldn't help it," suggested Diamond. "I dare say he has some good reason for it." "So I should have said," returned his father, "if he had not driven such a hard bargain with me at first." "But we don't know what may come of it yet, husband," said his wife. "Mr. Raymond may give a little to boot, seeing you've had more of the bargain than you wanted or reckoned upon." "I'm afraid not. He's a hard man," said Joseph, as he rose and went to get his cab out. Diamond resumed his singing. For some time he carolled snatches of everything or anything, but at last it settled down into something like what follows. I cannot tell where or how he got it. "Where did you come from, baby dear? Out of the everywhere into here. Where did you get your eyes so blue? Out of the sky as I came through. What makes the light in them sparkle and spin? Some of the starry spikes left in. Where did you get that little tear? I found it waiting when I got here. What makes your forehead so smooth and high? A soft hand stroked it as I went by. What makes your cheek like a warm white rose? I saw something better than any one knows. When's the 3-cornered smile of bliss? 3 angels gave me at once a kiss. Where did you get this pearly ear? God spoke, and it came out to hear. Where did you get those arms and hands? Love made itself into hooks and bands. Feet, whence did you come, you darling things? From the same box as the cherub's wings. How did they all just come to be you? God thought about me, and so I grew. But how did you come to us, you dear? God thought about you, and so I am here. You never made that song, Diamond, said his mother. No, mother, I wish I had. No, I don't. That would be to take it from somebody else. But it's mine for all that. What makes it yours? I love it so. Does loving a thing make it yours? I think so, mother. At least more than anything else can. If I didn't love baby, which couldn't be, you know, she wouldn't be mine a bit. But I do love baby, and baby is my very own Dulcimer. The baby's mine, Diamond. That makes her the more mine, mother. How do you make that out? Because you're mine, mother. Is that because you love me? Yes, just because. Love makes the only minus, said Diamond. When his father came home to have his dinner, and change Diamond for Ruby, they saw him look very sad, and he told them he had not had a fare worth mentioning the whole morning. We shall all have to go to the workhouse, wife, he said. It would be better to go to the back of the north wind, said Diamond dreamily, not intending to say it aloud. So it would, answered his father. But how are we to get there, Diamond? We must wait till we're taken, returned Diamond. Before his father could speak again, a knock came to the door, and in walked Mr. Raymond with a smile on his face. Joseph got up and received him respectfully, but not very cordially. Martha set a chair for him, but he would not sit down. You are not very glad to see me, he said to Joseph. You don't want to part with the old horse. Indeed, sir, you are mistaken there. What with anxiety about him and bad luck, I've wished I were rid of him 1,000 times. It was only to be for 3 months, and here it's 8 or 9. I'm sorry to hear such a statement, said Mr. Raymond. Hasn't he been of service to you? Not much. Not with his lameness. Ah, said Mr. Raymond hastily. You've been laming him, have you? That accounts for it. I see. It wasn't my fault, and he's all right now. I don't know how it happened, but he did it on purpose, said Diamond. He put his foot on a stone just to twist his ankle. How do you know that, Diamond? Said his father, turning to him. I never said so, for I could not think how it came. I heard it in the stable, answered Diamond. Let's have a look at him, said Mr. Raymond. If you'll step into the yard, said Joseph, I'll bring him out. They went, and Joseph, having first taken off his harness, walked Ruby into the middle of the yard. Why, said Mr. Raymond, you've not been using him well. I don't know what you mean by that, sir. I didn't expect to hear that from you. He's sound in wind and limb, as sound as a barrel. And as big, you might add. Why, he's as fat as a pig. You don't call that good usage? Joseph was too angry to make any answer. You've not worked him enough, I say. That's not making good use of him. That's not doing as you'd be done by. I shouldn't be sorry if I was served the same, sir. He's too fat, I say. There was a whole month I couldn't work him at all, and he did nothing but eat his head off. He's an awful eater. I've taken the best part of 6 hours a day out of him since, but I'm always afraid of his coming to grief again, and so I couldn't make the most even of that. I declare to you, sir, when he's between the shafts, I sit on the box as miserable as if I'd stolen him. He looks all the time as if he was a bottling up of complaints to make of me the minute he set eyes on you again. There, look at him now, squinting round at me with one eye. I declare to you, on my word, I haven't laid the whip on him more than 3 times. I'm glad to hear it. He never did want the whip. I didn't say that, sir. If ever a horse wanted the whip, he do. He brought me to beggary almost with his snail's pace. I'm very glad you've come to rid me of him." "I don't know that," said Mr. Raymond. "Suppose I were to ask you to buy him of me cheap?" "I wouldn't have him in a present, sir. I don't like him, and I wouldn't drive a horse that I didn't like. No, not for gold. It can't come to good where there's no love between them." "Just bring out your own horse, and let me see what sort of a pair they'd make." Joseph laughed rather bitterly as he went to fetch Diamond. When the two were placed side by side, Mr. Raymond could hardly keep his countenance, but from a mingling of feelings. Beside the great red round barrel Ruby, all body and no legs, Diamond looked like a clothes horse with a skin thrown over it. There was hardly a spot of him where you could not descry some sign of a bone underneath. Gaunt and grim and weary he stood, kissing his master, and heeding no one else. "You haven't been using him well," said Mr. Raymond. "I must say," returned Joseph, throwing an arm round his horse's neck, "that the remark had better have been spared, sir. The horse is worth 3 of the other now." "I don't think so. I think they make a very nice pair. If one is too fat, the other's too lean, so that's all right. And if you won't buy my Ruby, I must buy your Diamond." "Thank you, sir," said Joseph, in a tone implying anything but thanks. "You don't seem to like the proposal," said Mr. Raymond. "I don't," returned Joseph. "I wouldn't part with my old Diamond for his skin as full of nuggets as it is of bones." "Who said anything about parting with him?" "You did now, sir." "No, I didn't. I only spoke of buying him to make a pair with Ruby. We could pair Ruby and patch Diamond a bit. And for height, they are as near a match as I care about. Of course you would be the coachman. If only you would consent to be reconciled to Ruby." Joseph stood bewildered, unable to answer. "I've bought a small place in Kent," continued Mr. Raymond, "and I must have a pair to my carriage, for the roads are hilly thereabouts. I don't want to make a show with a pair of high steppers. I think these will just do. Suppose for a week or two you set yourself to take Ruby down and bring Diamond up. If we could lay a pipe from Ruby's sides into Diamond's, it would be the work of a moment, but I fear that wouldn't answer." A strong inclination to laugh intruded upon Joseph's inclination to cry, and made speech still harder than before. "I beg your pardon, sir," he said at length. "I've been so miserable, and for so long, that I never thought you was only a chaffing of me when you said I hadn't used the horses well. I did grumble at you, sir, many's the time in my trouble. But whenever I said anything, my little Diamond would look at me with a smile, as much as to say, 'I know him better than you, father.' And upon my word, I always thought the boy must be right." "Will you sell me old Diamond, then?" "I will, sir, on one condition, that if ever you want to part with him or me, you give me the option of buying him. I could not part with him, sir. As to who calls him his, that's nothing, for, as Diamond says, it's only loving a thing that can make it yours. And I do love old Diamond, sir, dearly." "Well, there's a cheque for 20 pounds, which I wrote to offer you for him in case I should find you had done the handsome thing by Ruby. Will that be enough?" "It's too much, sir. His body ain't worth it, shoes and all. It's only his heart, sir, that's worth millions. But his heart'll be mine all the same. So it's too much, sir." "I don't think so. It won't be, at least, by the time we've got him fed up again. You take it and welcome. Just go on with your cabbing for another month, only take it out of Ruby and let Diamond rest, and by that time I shall be ready for you to go down into the country." "Thank you, sir, thank you. Diamond set you down for a friend, sir, the moment he saw you. I do believe that child of mine knows more than other people." "I think so too," said Mr. Raymond as he walked away. He had meant to test Joseph when he made the bargain about Ruby, but had no intention of so greatly prolonging the trial. He had been taken ill in Switzerland, and had been quite unable to return sooner. He went away now, highly gratified at finding that he had stood the test, and was a true man. Joseph rushed in to his wife, who had been standing at the window, anxiously waiting the result of the long colloquy. When she heard that the horses were to go together in double harness, she burst forth into an immoderate fit of laughter. Diamond came up with the baby in his arms, and made big anxious eyes at her, saying, "What is the matter with you, mother dear? Do cry a little. It will do you good. When father takes ever so small a drop of spirits, he puts water to it." "You silly darling," said his mother. "How could I but laugh at the notion of that great fat Ruby going side by side with our poor old Diamond?" "But why not, mother? With a month's oats and nothing to do, Diamond'll be nearer Ruby's size than you will father's. I think it's very good for different sorts to go together. Now Ruby will have a chance of teaching Diamond better manners." "How dare you say such a thing, Diamond?" said his father angrily. "To compare the two for manners, there's no comparison possible. Our Diamond's a gentleman." "I don't mean to say he isn't, father, for I dare say some gentlemen judge their neighbours unjustly. That's all I mean. Diamond shouldn't have thought such bad things of Ruby. He didn't try to make the best of him." "How do you know that, pray?" "I heard them talking about it one night." "Who?" "Why, Diamond and Ruby. Ruby's an angel." Joseph stared and said no more. For all his new gladness, he was very gloomy as he reharnessed the angel, for he thought his darling Diamond was going out of his mind. He couldn't help thinking rather differently, however, when he found the change that had come over Ruby. Considering his fat, he exerted himself amazingly, and got over the ground with incredible speed. So willing, even anxious was he to go now, that Joseph had to hold him quite tight. Then, as he laughed at his own fancies, a new fear came upon him lest the horse should break his wind, and Mr. Raymond have a good cause to think he had not been using him well. He might even suppose that he had taken advantage of his new instructions to let out upon the horse some of his pent-up dislike, whereas in truth it had so utterly vanished that he felt as if Ruby, too, had been his friend all the time. End of chapter 33. Recording by Marisel Quee. Chapter 34 of At the Back of the North Wind. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. Chapter 34. In the Country. Before the end of the month, Ruby had got respectably thin, and Diamond respectably stout. They really began to look fit for double harness. Joseph and his wife got their affairs in order, and everything ready for migrating at the shortest notice, and they felt so peaceful and happy that they judged all the trouble they had gone through well worth enduring. As for Nanny, she had been so happy ever since she left the hospital that she expected nothing better, and saw nothing attractive in the notion of the country. At the same time, she had not the least idea of what the word country meant, for she had never seen anything about her but streets and gas lamps. Besides, she was more attached to Jim than to Diamond. Jim was a reasonable being, Diamond in her eyes at best only an amiable overgrown baby, whom no amount of expostulation would ever bring to talk sense, not to say think it. Now that she could manage the baby as well as he, she judged herself altogether his superior. Towards his father and mother, she was all they could wish. Diamond had taken a great deal of pains and trouble to find Jim, and had at last succeeded, through the help of the tall policeman, who was glad to renew his acquaintance with the strange child. Jim had moved his quarters, and had not heard of Nanny's illness till some time after she was taken to the hospital, where he was too shy to go and inquire about her. But when at length she went to live with Diamond's family, Jim was willing enough to go and see her. It was after one of his visits, during which they had been talking of her new prospects, that Nanny expressed to Diamond her opinion of the country. "There ain't nothing in it but the sun and moon, Diamond." "There's trees and flowers," said Diamond. "Well, they ain't no count," returned Nanny. "Ain't they? They're so beautiful. They make you happy to look at them." "That's because you're such a silly." Diamond smiled with a far-away look, as if he were gazing through clouds of green leaves, and the vision contented him. But he was thinking with himself what more he could do for Nanny, and that same evening he went to find Mr. Raymond, for he had heard that he had returned to town. "Ah, how do you do, Diamond?" said Mr. Raymond. "I am glad to see you." And he was indeed, for he had grown very fond of him. His opinion of him was very different from Nanny's. "What do you want now, my child?" he asked. "I'm always wanting something, sir," answered Diamond. "Well, that's quite right, so long as what you want is right. Everybody is always wanting something, only we don't mention it in the right place often enough. What is it now?" "There's a friend of Nanny's, a lame boy, called Jim." "I've heard of him," said Mr. Raymond. "Well?" "Nanny doesn't care much about going to the country, sir." "Well, what has that to do with Jim?" "You couldn't find a corner for Jim to work in, could you, sir?" "I don't know that I couldn't. That is, if you can show good reason for it." "He's a good boy, sir." "Well, so much the better for him." "I know he can shine boots, sir." "So much the better for us." "You want your boots shined in the country, don't you, sir?" "Yes, to be sure." "It wouldn't be nice to walk over the flowers with dirty boots, would it, sir?" "No, indeed." "They wouldn't like it, would they?" "No, they wouldn't." "Then Nanny would be better pleased to go, sir." "If the flowers didn't like dirty boots to walk over them, Nanny wouldn't mind going to the country. Is that it? I don't quite see it." "No, sir. I didn't mean that. I meant if you would take Jim with you to clean your boots, and do odd jobs, you know, sir, then Nanny would like it better. She's so fond of Jim." "Now you come to the point, Diamond. I see what you mean exactly. I will turn it over in my mind. Could you bring Jim to see me?" "I'll try, sir. But they don't mind me much. They think I'm silly," added Diamond, with one of his sweetest smiles. What Mr. Raymond thought I dare hardly attempt to put down here, but one part of it was, that the highest wisdom must ever appear folly to those who do not possess it. "I think he would come through. After dark, you know," Diamond continued. "He does well at shining boots. People's kind to lame boys, you know, sir, but after dark there ain't so much doing." Diamond succeeded in bringing Jim to Mr. Raymond, and the consequence was that he resolved to give the boy a chance. He provided new clothes for both him and Nanny, and upon a certain day Joseph took his wife and 3 children, and Nanny and Jim, by train, to a certain station in the country of Kent, where they found a cart waiting to carry them and their luggage to the Mound, which was the name of Mr. Raymond's new residence. I will not describe the varied feelings of the party as they went, or when they arrived. All I will say is that Diamond, who is my only care, was full of quiet delight, a gladness too deep to talk about. Joseph returned to town the same night, and the next morning drove Ruby and Diamond down, with a carriage behind them, and Mr. Raymond and a lady in the carriage, for Mr. Raymond was an old bachelor no longer. He was bringing his wife with him to live at the Mound. The moment Nanny saw her, she recognized her as the lady who had lent her the ruby ring. That ring had been given her by Mr. Raymond. The weather was very hot, and the woods very shadowy. There were not a great many wild flowers, for it was getting well towards autumn, and the most of the wild flowers rise early to be before the leaves, because if they did not, they would never get a glimpse of the sun for them. So they have their fun over, and are ready to go to bed again by the time the trees are dressed. But there was plenty of the loveliest grass and daisies about the house, and Diamond's chief pleasure seemed to be to lie amongst them and breathe the pure air. But all the time he was dreaming of the country at the back of the north wind, and trying to recall the songs the river used to sing, for this was more like being at the back of the north wind than anything he had known since he left it. Sometimes he would have his little brother, sometimes his little sister, and sometimes both of them in the grass with him, and then he felt just like a cat with her first kittens, he said, only he couldn't purr. All he could do was to sing. These were very different times from those when he used to drive the cab, but you must not suppose that Diamond was idle. He did not do so much for his mother now, because Nanny occupied his former place, but he helped his father still, both in the stable and the harness room, and generally went with him on the box, that he might learn to drive a pair, and be ready to open the carriage door. Mr. Raymond advised his father to give him plenty of liberty. "A boy like that," he said, "ought not to be pushed." Joseph assented heartily, smiling to himself at the idea of pushing Diamond. After doing everything that fell to his share, the boy had a wealth of time at his disposal, and a happy, sometimes merry time it was. Only for 2 months or so he neither saw nor heard anything of North Wind. End of chapter 34. Recording by Maricel Quee. Chapter 35. Over the Back of the North Wind. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. Chapter 35. I make Diamond's acquaintance. Mr. Raymond's house was called the Mound, because it stood upon a little steep knoll, so smooth and symmetrical that it showed itself at once to be artificial. It had, beyond doubt, been built for Queen Elizabeth as a hunting tower, a place, namely, from the top of which you could see the country for miles on all sides, and so be able to follow with your eyes the flying deer and the pursuing hounds and horsemen. The mound had been cast up to give a good basement advantage over the neighbouring heights and woods. There was a great quarry hole not far off, brim full of water, from which, as the current legend stated, the materials forming the heart of the mound, a kind of stone unfit for building, had been dug. The house itself was of brick, and they said the foundations were first laid in the natural level, and then the stones and the earth of the mound were heaped about and between them, so that its great height should be well buttressed. Joseph and his wife lived in a little cottage a short way from the house. It was a real cottage, with a roof of thick thatch, which in June and July the wind sprinkled with red and white petals it shook from the loose topmost sprays of the rose trees climbing the walls. At first Diamond had a nest under this thatch, a pretty little room with white muslin curtains, but afterwards Mr. and Mrs. Raymond wanted to have him for a page in the house, and his father and mother were quite pleased to have him employed without his leaving them. So he was dressed in a suit of blue, from which his pale face and fair hair came out like the loveliest blossom, and took up his abode in the house. "Would you be afraid to sleep alone, Diamond?" asked his mistress. "I don't know what you mean, ma'am," said Diamond. "I never was afraid of anything that I can recollect, not much at least." "There's a little room at the top of the house, all alone," she returned. "Perhaps you would not mind sleeping there?" "I can sleep anywhere, and I like best to be high up. Should I be able to see out?" "I will show you the place," she answered. And taking him by the hand, she led him up and up the oval winding stair in one of the 2 towers. Near the top they entered a tiny little room, with 2 windows from which you could see over the whole country. Diamond clapped his hands with delight. "You would like this room then, Diamond?" said his mistress. "It's the grandest room in the house," he answered. "I shall be near the stars, and yet not far from the tops of the trees. That's just what I like." I dare say he thought also that it would be a nice place for North Wind to call at in passing, but he said nothing of that sort. Below him spread a lake of green leaves, with glimpses of grass here and there at the bottom of it. As he looked down, he saw a squirrel appear suddenly, and as suddenly vanished amongst the topmost branches. "Aha, little squirrel!" he cried. "My nest is built higher than yours." "You can be up here with your books as much as you like," said his mistress. "I will have a little bell hung at the door, which I can ring when I want you. Half way down the stair is the drawing room." So Diamond was installed as page, and his new room got ready for him. It was very soon after this that I came to know Diamond. I was then a tutor in a family whose estate adjoined the little property belonging to the mound. I had made the acquaintance of Mr. Raymond in London some time before, and was walking up the drive towards the house to call upon him one fine warm evening, when I saw Diamond for the first time. He was sitting at the foot of a great beech tree, a few yards from the road, with a book on his knees. He did not see me. I walked up behind the tree, and peeping over his shoulder, saw that he was reading a fairy book. "What are you reading?" I said, and spoke suddenly, with the hope of seeing a startled little face look round at me. Diamond turned his head as quietly as if he were only obeying his mother's voice, and the calmness of his face rebuked my unkind desire and made me ashamed of it. "I am reading the story of the little lady and the goblin prince," said Diamond. "I'm sorry, I don't know the story," I returned. "Who is it by?" "Mr. Raymond made it." "Is he your uncle?" I asked at a guess. "No, he's my master." "What do you do for him?" I asked respectfully. "Anything he wishes me to do," he answered. "I am busy for him now. He gave me this story to read. He wants my opinion upon it." "Don't you find it rather hard to make up your mind?" "Oh dear no. Any story always tells me itself what I'm to think about it. Mr. Raymond doesn't want me to say whether it is a clever story or not, but whether I like it, and why I like it. I can never tell what they call clever from what they call silly, but I always know whether I like a story or not." "And can you always tell why you like it or not?" "No, very often I can't at all. Sometimes I can. I always know, but I can't always tell why. Mr. Raymond writes the stories, and then tries them on me. Mother does the same when she makes jam. She's made such a lot of jam since we came here, and she always makes me taste it to see if it'll do. Mother knows by the face I make whether it will or not." At this moment I caught sight of two more children approaching. One was a handsome girl, the other a pale-faced, awkward-looking boy, who limped much on one leg. I withdrew a little to see what would follow, for they seemed in some consternation. After a few hurried words, they went off together, and I pursued my way to the house, where I was kindly received by Mr. and Mrs. Raymond as I could have desired. From them I learned something of Diamond, and was in consequence the more glad to find him, when I returned, seated in the same place as before. "What did the boy and girl want with you, Diamond?" I asked. "They had seen a creature that frightened them." "And they came to tell you about it?" "They couldn't get water out of the well for it, so they wanted me to go with them." "They're both bigger than you." "Yes, but they were frightened at it." "And weren't you frightened at it?" "No." "Why?" "Because I'm silly. I'm never frightened at things." I could not help thinking of the old meaning of the word silly. "And what was it?" I asked. "I think it was a kind of an angel, a very little one. It had a long body and great wings, which it drove about so fast that they grew a thin cloud all round it. It flew backwards and forwards over the well, or hung right in the middle, making a mist of its wings, as if its business was to take care of the water." "And what did you do to drive it away?" "I didn't drive it away. I knew, whatever the creature was, the well was to get water out of. So I took the jug, dipped it in, and drew the water." "And what did the creature do?" "Flew about." "And it didn't hurt you?" "No. Why should it? I wasn't doing anything wrong." "What did your companions say then?" "They said, 'Thank you, Diamond. What a dear silly you are.'" "And weren't you angry with them?" "No. Why should I? I should like if they would play with me a little. but they always like better to go away together when their work is over. They never heed me. I don't mind it much, though. The other creatures are friendly. They don't run away from me. Only they're all so busy with their own work, they don't mind me much." "Do you feel lonely then?" "Oh, no. When nobody minds me, I get into my nest and look up. And then the sky does mind me, and thinks about me." "Where is your nest?" He rose, saying, "I will show you," and led me to the other side of the tree. There hung a little rope ladder from one of the lower boughs. The boy climbed up the ladder and got upon the bough. Then he climbed farther into the leafy branches and went out of sight. After a little while I heard his voice coming down out of the tree. "I'm in my nest now," said the voice. "I can't see you," I returned. "I can't see you either, but I can see the first star peeping out of the sky. I should like to get up into the sky. Don't you think I shall, some day?" "Yes, I do. Tell me what more you see up there." "I don't see anything more except a few leaves, and the big sky over me. It goes swinging about. The earth is all behind my back. There comes another star. The wind is like kisses from a big lady. When I get up here, I feel as if I were in North Wind's arms." This was the first I heard of North Wind. The whole ways and look of the child, so full of quiet wisdom, yet so ready to accept the judgment of others in his own dispraise, took hold of my heart, and I felt myself wonderfully drawn towards him. It seemed to me, somehow, as if little Diamond possessed the secret of life, and was what he was so ready to think the lowest living thing, an angel of God with something special to say or do. A gush of reverence came over me, and with a single good night I turned and left him in his nest. I saw him often after this, and gained so much of his confidence that he told me all I have told you. I cannot pretend to account for it. I leave that for each philosophical reader to do after his own fashion. The easiest way is that of Nanny and Jim, who said often to each other that Diamond had a tile loose. But Mr. Raymond was much of my opinion concerning the boy, while Mrs. Raymond confessed that she often rang her bell just to have once more the pleasure of seeing the lovely stillness of the boy's face, with those blue eyes which seemed rather made for other people to look into than for himself to look out of. It was plainer to others than to himself that he felt the desertion of Nanny and Jim. They appeared to regard him as a mere toy, except when they found he could minister to the scruple of using him, generally with success. They were, however, well behaved to a wonderful degree, while I have little doubt that much of their good behaviour was owing to the unconscious influence of the boy they called God's baby. One very strange thing is that I could never find out where he got some of his many songs. At times they would be but bubbles blown out of a nursery rhyme, as was the following, which I heard him sing one evening to his little Dulcimer. There were about 100 of sheep feeding in a paddock near him. Their white wool dyed a pale rose in the light of the setting sun. Those in the long shadows from the trees were dead white. Those in the sunlight were half glorified with pale rose. Little Bo Peep, she lost her sheep, and didn't know where to find them. They were over the height and out of sight, trailing their tails behind them. Little Bo Peep woke out of her sleep, jumped up, and set out to find them. The silly things, they've got no wings, and they've left their trails behind them. They've taken their tails, but they've left their trails, and so I shall follow and find them. For wherever a tail had dragged a trail, the long grass grew behind them. And Day's eyes and Buttercup's cowslips and crow's feet were glittering in the sun. She threw down her book, and caught up her crook, and after her sheep did run. She ran, and ever as she ran the grass grew higher and higher, till over the hill the sun began to set in a flame of fire. She ran on still up the grassy hill, and the grass grew higher and higher. When she reached its crown, the sun was down, and had left a trail of fire. The sheep and her tails were gone, all gone, and no more trail behind them. Yes, yes, they were there, long-tailed and fair, but alas, she could not find them. Purple and gold and rosy and blue, with their tails all white behind them. Her sheep they did run in the trail of the sun. She saw them, but could not find them. After the sun, like clouds they did run, but she knew they were her sheep. She sat down to cry, and look up at the sky, but she cried herself asleep. And as she slept the dew fell fast, and the wind blew from the sky, and strange things took place that shun the day's face, because they are sweet and shy. Nibble, nibble, crop, she heard as she woke. 100 little lambs did pluck and eat the grass so sweet that grew in the trails of their dams. Little Bo Peep caught up her crook, and wiped the tears that did blind her, and nibble, nibble, crop, without a stop, the lambs came eating behind her. Home, home, she came, both tired and lame, with 3 times as many sheep. In a month or more they'll be as big as before, and then she'll laugh in her sleep. But what would you say if one fine day, when they've got their bushiest tails, their grown-up game should be just the same, and she have to follow their trails? Never weep, Bo Peep, though you lose your sheep, and do not know where to find them. 'Tis after the sun the mothers have run, and there are their lambs behind them. I confess again to having touched up a little, but it loses far more in Diamond's sweet voice singing it, than it gains by a rhyme here and there. Some of them were out of books Mr. Raymond had given him. These he always knew, but about the others he could seldom tell. Sometimes he would say, "I made that one," but generally he would say, "I don't know, I found it somewhere," or "I got it at the back of the north wind." One evening I found him sitting on the grassy slope under the house, with his dulcimer in his arms and his little brother rolling on the grass beside them. He was chanting in his usual way, more like the sound of a brook than anything else I can think of. When I went up to them he ceased his chant. "Do go on, Diamond. Don't mind me," I said. He began again at once. While he sang, Nanny and Jim sat a little way off, one hemming a pocket handkerchief, and the other reading a story to her. But they never heeded Diamond. This is as near what he sang as I can recollect, or reproduce rather. "What would you see if I took you up to my little nest in the air? You would see the sky like a clear blue cup turned upside downwards there. What would you do if I took you there, to my little nest in the tree? My child with cries would trouble the air to get what she could but see. What would you get in the top of the tree, for all your crying and grief? Not a star would you clutch of all you see, you could only gather a leaf. But when you had lost your greedy grief, content to see from afar, you would find in your hand a withering leaf, in your heart a shining star." As Diamond went on singing, it grew very dark, and just as he ceased, there came a great flash of lightning that blinded us all for a moment. Dulcimer crowed with pleasure, but when the roar of the thunder came after it, the little brother gave a loud cry of terror. Nanny and Jim came running up to us, pale with fear. Diamond's face too was paler than usual, but with delight. Some of the glory seemed to have clung to it, and remained shining. "You're not frightened, are you, Diamond?" I said. "No, why should I be?" he answered with his usual question, looking up in my face with calm shining eyes. "He ain't got sense to be frightened," said Nanny, going up to him and giving him a pitying hug. "Perhaps there's more sense in not being frightened, Nanny," I returned. "Do you think the lightning can do as it likes?" "It might kill you," said Jim. "Oh, no, it mightn't," said Diamond. As he spoke, there came another great flash and a tearing crack. "There's a tree struck," I said, and when we looked round, after the blinding of the flash had left our eyes, we saw a huge bough of the beech tree in which was Diamond's nest hanging to the ground like the broken wing of a bird. "There!" cried Nanny. "I told you so. If you had been up there, you see what would have happened, you little silly." "No, I don't," said Diamond, and began to sing to Dulcimer. All I could hear of the song, for the other children were going on with their chatter, was The clock struck 1, and the mouse came down, dickory dickory dock. Then there came a blast of wind, and the rain followed in straight pouring lines, as if out of a watering pot. Diamond jumped up with his little Dulcimer in his arms, and Nanny caught up the little boy, and they ran for the cottage. Jim vanished with a double shuffle, and I went into the house. When I came out again to return home, the clouds were gone, and the evening sky glimmered through the trees, blue and pale green towards the west. I turned my steps a little aside to look at the stricken beech. I saw the bough torn from the stem, and that was all the twilight would allow me to see. While I stood gazing, down from the sky came a sound of singing, but the voice was neither of lark nor of nightingale. It was sweeter than either. It was the voice of Diamond up in his airy nest. The lightning and thunder, they go and they come, but the stars and the stillness are always at home. And then the voice ceased. "Good night, Diamond," I said. "Good night, sir," answered Diamond. As I walked away pondering, I saw the great black top of the beech swaying about against the sky in an upper wind, and heard the murmur of as many dim, half-articulate voices filling the solitude around Diamond's nest. End of chapter 35. Recording by Maricel Kui. Chapter 36 of At the Back of the North Wind. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. Chapter 36. Diamond questions North Wind. My readers will not wonder that, after this, I did my very best to gain the friendship of Diamond. Nor did I find this at all difficult. The child was so ready to trust. Upon one subject alone was he reticent, the story of his relations with North Wind. I fancy he could not quite make up his mind what to think of them. At all events, it was some little time before he trusted me with this. Only then he told me everything. If I could not regard it all in exactly the same light as he did, I was, while guiltless of the least pretence, fully sympathetic, and he was satisfied without demanding of me any theory of difficult points involved. I let him see plainly enough that whatever might be the explanation of the marvellous experience, I would have given much for a similar one myself. On an evening soon after the thunderstorm, in a late twilight, with a half moon high in the heavens, I came upon Diamond in the act of climbing by his little ladder into the beech tree. "What are you always going up there for, Diamond?" I heard Nanny ask, rather rudely, I thought. "Sometimes for one thing, sometimes for another, Nanny," answered Diamond, looking skywards as he climbed. "You'll break your neck some day," she said. "I'm going up to look at the moon to-night," he added, without heeding her remark. "You'll see the moon just as well down here," she returned. "I don't think so." "You'll be no nearer to her up there." "Oh yes, I shall. I must be nearer her, you know. I wish I could dream as pretty dreams about her as you can, Nanny." "You silly! You never have done about that dream. I never dreamed but that one, and it was nonsense enough, I'm sure." "It wasn't nonsense. It was a beautiful dream, and a funny one too, both in one." "But what's the good of talking about it that way, when you know it was only a dream? Dreams ain't true." "That one was true, Nanny. You know it was. Didn't you come to grief for doing what you were told not to do? And isn't that true?" "I can't get any sense into him," exclaimed Nanny, with an expression of mild despair. "Do you really believe, Diamond, that there's a house in the moon, with a beautiful lady and a crooked old man and dusters in it?" "If there isn't, there's something better," he answered, and vanished in the leaves over our heads. I went into the house, where I visited often in the evenings. When I came out, there was a little wind blowing, very pleasant after the heat of the day, for although it was late summer now, it was still hot. The tree tops were swinging about in it. I took my way past the beech, and called up to see if Diamond were still in his nest in its rocking head. "Are you there, Diamond?" I said. "Yes, sir," came his clear voice in reply. "Isn't it growing too dark for you to get down safely?" "Oh no, sir, if I take time to it. I know my way so well, and never let go with one hand till I've got a good hold with the other." "Do be careful," I insisted, foolishly, seeing the boy was as careful as he could be already. "I'm coming," he returned. "I've got all the moon I want to night." I heard a rustling and a rustling drawing nearer and nearer. 3 or 4 minutes elapsed, and he appeared at length creeping down his little ladder. I took him in my arms and set him on the ground. "Thank you, sir," he said. "That's the north wind blowing, isn't it, sir?" "I can't tell," I answered. "It feels cool and kind, and I think it may be, but I couldn't be sure except it were stronger, for a gentle wind might turn any way amongst the trunks of the trees." "I shall know when I get up to my own room," said Diamond. "I think I hear my mistress' bell. Good night, sir." He ran to the house, and I went home. His mistress had rung for him, only to send him to bed, for she was very careful over him, and I dare say thought he was not looking well. When he reached his own room, he opened both his windows, one of which looked to the north and the other to the east, to find how the wind blew. It blew right in at the northern window. Diamond was very glad, for he thought perhaps North Wind herself would come now. A real north wind had never blown all the time since he left London. But as she always came of herself, and never when he was looking for her, and indeed almost never when he was thinking of her, he shut the east window and went to bed. Perhaps some of my readers may wonder that he could go to sleep with such an expectation, and indeed, if I had not known him, I should have wondered at it myself. But it was one of his peculiarities, and seemed nothing strange in him. He was so full of quietness that he could go to sleep almost any time, if he only composed himself and let the sleep come. This time he went fast asleep as usual. But he woke in the dim blue night. The moon had vanished. He thought he heard a knocking at his door. "Somebody wants me," he said to himself, and jumping out of bed, ran to open it. But there was no one there. He closed it again, and, the noise still continuing, found that another door in the room was rattling. It belonged to a closet, he thought, but he had never been able to open it. The wind blowing in at the window must be shaking it. He would go and see if it was so. The door now opened quite easily, but to his surprise, instead of a closet, he found a long narrow room. The moon, which was sinking in the west, shone in at the open window at the further end. The room was low with a coved ceiling, and occupied the whole top of the house, immediately under the roof. It was quite empty. The yellow light of the half moon streamed over the dark floor. He was so delighted at the discovery of the strange desolate moonlit place close to his own snug little room, that he began to dance and skip about the floor. The wind came in through the door he had left open, and blew about him as he danced, and he kept turning towards it that it might blow in his face. He kept picturing to himself the many places, lovely and desolate, the hillsides and farmyards and tree tops and meadows, over which it had blown on its way to the mound. And as he danced, he grew more and more delighted with the motion and the wind. His feet grew stronger, and his body lighter, until at length it seemed as if he were borne up on the air, and could almost fly. So strong did his feeling become, that at last he began to doubt whether he was not in one of those precious dreams he had so often had, in which he floated about on the air at will. But something made him look up, and to his unspeakable delight he found his uplifted hands lying in those of North Wind, who was dancing with him, round and round the long bare room, her hair now falling to the floor, now filling the arched ceiling, her eyes shining on him like thinking stars, and the sweetest of grand smiles playing breezily about her beautiful mouth. She was, as so often before, of the height of a rather tall lady. She did not stoop in order to dance with him, but held his hands high in hers. When he saw her, he gave one spring, and his arms were about her neck, and her arms holding him to her bosom. The same moment she swept with him through the open window in at which the moon was shining, made a circuit like a bird about to alight, and settled with him in his nest on top of the great beech tree. There she placed him on her lap, and began to hush him as if he were her own baby, and Diamond was so entirely happy that he did not care to speak a word. At length, however, he found that he was going to sleep, and that would be to lose so much, that, pleasant as it was, he could not consent. "Please, dear North Wind," he said, "I'm so happy that I'm afraid it's a dream. How am I to know that it's not a dream?" "What does it matter?" returned North Wind. "I should cry," said Diamond. "But why should you cry? The dream, if it is a dream, is a pleasant one, is it not?" "That's just why I want it to be true." "Have you forgotten what you said to Nanny about her dream?" "It's not for the dream itself. I mean, it's not for the pleasure of it," answered Diamond. "For I have that, whether it be a dream or not. It's for you, North Wind. I can't bear to find it a dream, because I should lose you. You would be nobody then, and I could not bear that. You ain't a dream, are you, dear North Wind? Do say no, else I shall cry and come awake, and you'll be gone for ever. I daren't dream about you once again if you ain't anybody." "I'm either not a dream, or there's something better that's not a dream, Diamond," said North Wind, in a rather sorrowful tone, he thought. "But it's not something better. It's you I want, North Wind," he persisted, already beginning to cry a little. She made no answer, but rose with him in her arms, and sailed away over the tree tops till they came to a meadow where a flock of sheep was feeding. "Do you remember what the song you were singing a week ago says about Bo Peep, how she lost her sheep, but got twice as many lambs?" asked North Wind, sitting down on the grass, and placing him in her lap as before. "Oh yes, I do well enough," answered Diamond. "But I never just quite liked that rhyme." "Why not, child?" "Because it seems to say one's as good as another, or two new ones are better than the one that's lost. I've been thinking about it a great deal, and it seems to me that although any one sixpence is as good as any other sixpence, not 20 lambs would do instead of one sheep whose face you knew. Somehow, when once you've looked into anybody's eyes, right deep down into them, I mean, nobody will do for that one any more. Nobody ever so beautiful or so good will make up for that one going out of sight. So you see, North Wind, I can't help being frightened to think that perhaps I am only dreaming, and you are nowhere at all. Do tell me that you are my own real beautiful North Wind." Again she rose and shot herself into the air, as if uneasy because she could not answer him, and Diamond lay quiet in her arms, waiting for what she would say. He tried to see up into her face, for he was dreadfully afraid she was not answering him, because she could not say that she was not a dream. But she had let her hair fall over her face, so that he could not see it. This frightened him still more. "Do speak, North Wind," he said at last. "I never speak when I have nothing to say," she replied. "Then I do think you must be a real North Wind, and no dream," said Diamond. "But I'm looking for something to say all the time." "But I don't want you to say what's hard to find. If you were to say one word to comfort me that wasn't true, then I should know you must be a dream, for a great beautiful lady like you could never tell a lie." But she mightn't know how to say what she had to say, so that a little boy like you would understand it, said North Wind. "Here, let us get down again, and I will try to tell you what I think. You mustn't suppose I am able to answer all your questions, though. There are a great many things I don't understand more than you do." She descended on a grassy hillock in the midst of a wild furzy common. There was a rabbit warren underneath, and some of the rabbits came out of their holes in the moonlight, looking very sober and wise, just like patriarchs standing in their tent doors, and looking about them before going to bed. When they saw North Wind, instead of turning round and vanishing again with a thump of their heels, they cantered slowly up to her and snuffled all about her with their long upper lips, which moved every way at once. That was their way of kissing her, and as she talked to Diamond, she would every now and then stroke down their furry backs, or lift and play with their long ears. They would, Diamond thought, have leaped upon her lap, but that he was there already. "I think," said she, after they had been sitting silent for a while, "that if I were only a dream, you would not have been able to love me so. You love me when you are not with me, don't you?" "Indeed I do," answered Diamond, stroking her hand. "I see, I see. How could I be able to love you as I do, if you weren't there at all, you know? Besides, I couldn't be able to dream anything half so beautiful all out of my own head, or if I did, I couldn't love a fancy of my own like that, could I?" "I think not. You might have loved me in a dream, dreamily, and forgotten me when you woke, I dare say, but not loved me like a real being as you love me. Even then, I don't think you could dream anything that hadn't something real like it somewhere. But you've seen me in many shapes, Diamond. You remember I was a wolf once, don't you?" "Oh yes, a good wolf that frightened a naughty drunken nurse." "Well, suppose I were to turn ugly, would you rather I weren't a dream then?" "Yes, for I should know that you were beautiful inside all the same. You would love me, and I should love you all the same. I shouldn't like you to look ugly, you know, but I shouldn't believe it a bit." "Not if you saw it?" "No, not if I saw it ever so plain." "There's my Diamond. I will tell you all I know about it then. I don't think I am just what you fancy me to be. I have to shape myself various ways to various people, but the heart of me is true. People call me by dreadful names, and think they know all about me, but they don't. Sometimes they call me Bad Fortune, sometimes Evil Chance, sometimes Ruin, and they have another name for me which they think the most dreadful of all." "What is that?" asked Diamond, smiling up in her face. "I won't tell you that name. Do you remember having to go through me to get into the country at my back?" "Oh yes, I do. How cold you were, North Wind! And so white, all but your lovely eyes. My heart grew like a lump of ice, and then I forgot for a while." "You were very near knowing what they call me then. Would you be afraid of me if you had to go through me again?" "No. Why should I? Indeed, I should be glad enough, if it was only to get another peep of the country at your back." "You've never seen it yet." "Haven't I, North Wind? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I had. What did I see then?" "Only a picture of it. The real country at my real back is ever so much more beautiful than that. You shall see it one day, perhaps before very long." "Do they sing songs there?" "Don't you remember the dream you had about the little boys that dug for the stars?" "Yes, that I do. I thought you must have had something to do with that dream, it was so beautiful." "Yes, I gave you that dream." "Oh, thank you. Did you give Nanny her dream too, about the moon and the bees?" "Yes, I was the lady that sat at the window of the moon." "Oh, thank you. I was almost sure you had something to do with that too. And did you tell Mr. Raymond the story about the Princess Daylight?" "I believe I had something to do with it. At all events, he thought about it one night when he couldn't sleep. But I want to ask you whether you remember the song the boy angels sang in that dream of yours." "No, I couldn't keep it, do what I would, and I did try." "That was my fault." "How could that be, North Wind?" "Because I didn't know it properly myself, and so I couldn't teach it to you. I could only make a rough guess at something like what it would be, and so I wasn't able to make you dream it hard enough to remember it. Nor would I have done so if I could, for it was not correct. I made you dream pictures of it, though. But you will hear the very song itself when you do get to the back of "My own dear North Wind," said Diamond, finishing the sentence for her, and kissing the arm that held him leaning against her. "And now we've settled all this, for the time at least," said North Wind. "But I can't feel quite sure yet," said Diamond. "You must wait a while for that. Meantime you may be hopeful and content not to be quite sure. Come now, I will take you home again, for it won't do to tire you too much." "Oh, no, no! I'm not the least tired," pleaded Diamond. "It is better, though." "Very well, if you wish it," yielded Diamond with a sigh. "You are a dear good boy," said North Wind. "I will come for you again to morrow night, and take you out for a longer time. We shall make a little journey together, in fact. We shall start earlier, and as the moon will be later, we shall have a little moonlight all the way." She rose and swept over the meadow and the trees. In a few moments the mound appeared below them. She sank a little, and floated in at the window of Diamond's room. There she laid him on his bed, covered him over, and in a moment he was lapped in a dreamless sleep. End of chapter 36. Recording by Marisol Kui. Chapter 37 of At the Back of the North Wind. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. Chapter 37. Once More. The next night Diamond was seated by his open window, with his head on his hand, rather tired, but so eagerly waiting for the promised visit that he was afraid he could not sleep. But he started suddenly, and found that he had been already asleep. He rose, and looking out of the window saw something white against his beech tree. It was North Wind. She was holding by one hand to a top branch. Her hair and her garments went floating away behind her over the tree, whose top was swaying about while the others were still. "Are you ready, Diamond?" she asked. "Yes," answered Diamond, "quite ready." In a moment she was at the window, and her arms came in and took him. She sailed away so swiftly that he could at first mark nothing but the speed with which the clouds above and the dim earth below went rushing past. But soon he began to see that the sky was very lovely, with mottled clouds all about the moon, on which she threw faint colours like those of mother of pearl, or an opal. The night was warm, and in the lady's arms he did not feel the wind which down below was making waves in the ripe corn, and ripples on the rivers and lakes. At length they descended on the side of an open earthy hill, just where from beneath a stone a spring came bubbling out. "I am going to take you along this little brook," said North Wind. "I am not wanted for anything else to-night, so I can give you a treat." She stooped over the stream, and holding Diamond down close to the surface of it, glided along level with its flow as it ran down the hill. And the song of the brook came up into Diamond's ears, and grew and changed with every turn. It seemed to Diamond to be singing the story of its life to him. And so it was. It began with a musical tinkle, which changed to a babble, then to a gentle rushing. Sometimes its song would almost cease, and then break out again, tinkle babble, and rush, all at once. At the bottom of the hill they came to a small river, into which the brook flowed with a muffled but merry sound. Along the surface of the river, darkly clear below them in the moonlight, they floated. Now, where it widened out into a little lake, they would hover for a moment over a bed of water lilies, and watch them swing about, folded in sleep, as the water on which they leaned swayed in the presence of North Wind. And now they would watch the fishes asleep among their roots below. Sometimes she would hold Diamond over a deep hollow curving into the bank, that he might look far into the cool stillness. Sometimes she would leave the river and sweep across a clover field. The bees were all at home, and the clover was asleep. Then she would return and follow the river. It grew wider and wider as it went. Now the armies of wheat and of oats would hang over its rush from the opposite banks. Now the willows would dip low branches in its still waters, and now it would lead them through stately trees and grassy banks into a lovely garden, where the roses and lilies were asleep, the tender flowers quite folded up, and only a few wide awake and sending out their life in sweet strong odours. Wider and wider grew the stream, until they came upon boats lying along its banks, which rocked a little in the flutter of North Wind's garments. Then came houses on the banks, each standing in a lovely lawn with grand trees. And in parts the river was so high that some of the grass and the roots of some of the trees were under water, and Diamond, as they glided through between the stems, could see the grass at the bottom of the water. Then they would leave the river and float about and over the houses, one after another, beautiful rich houses which, like fine trees, had taken centuries to grow. There was scarcely a light to be seen, and not a movement to be heard. All the people in them lay fast asleep. "What a lot of dreams they must be dreaming," said Diamond. "Yes," returned North Wind. "They can't surely be all lies, can they?" "I should think it depends on who dreams them," suggested Diamond. "Yes," said North Wind. "The people who think lies and do lies are very likely to dream lies. But the people who love what is true will surely now and then dream true things. But then something depends on whether the dreams are home-grown, or whether the seed of them is blown over somebody else's garden wall. Ah! There's some one awake in this house." They were floating past a window in which a light was burning. Diamond heard a moan, and looked up anxiously in North Wind's face. "It's a lady," said North Wind. "She can't sleep for pain." "Couldn't you do something for her?" said Diamond. "No, I can't, but you could." "What could I do?" "Sing a little song to her." "She wouldn't hear me." "I will take you in, and then she will hear you." "But that would be rude, wouldn't it? You can go where you please, of course, but I should have no business in her room." "You may trust me, Diamond. I shall take good care of the lady as of you. The window is open. Come." By a shaded lamp a lady was seated in a white wrapper, trying to read, but moaning every minute. North Wind floated behind her chair, set Diamond down, and told him to sing something. He was a little frightened, but he thought a while, and then sang: "The sun is gone down, and the moon is in the sky, but the sun will come up, and the moon be laid by. The flower is asleep, but it is not dead. When the morning shines, it will lift its head. When winter comes, it will die. No, no, it will only hide from the frost and the snow. Sure is the summer, sure is the sun. The night and the winter are shadows that run." The lady never lifted her eyes from her book, or her head from her hand. As soon as Diamond had finished, North Wind lifted him and carried him away. "Didn't the lady hear me?" asked Diamond, when they were once more floating down the river. "Oh yes, she heard you," answered North Wind. "Was she frightened then?" "Oh no." "Why didn't she look to see who it was?" "She didn't know you were there." "How could she hear me then?" "She didn't hear you with her ears." "What did she hear me with?" "With her heart." "Where did she think the words came from?" "She thought they came out of the book she was reading. She will search all through it to-morrow to find them, and won't be able to understand it at all." "Oh, what fun!" said Diamond. "What will she do?" "I can tell you what she won't do. She'll never forget the meaning of them, and she'll never be able to remember the words of them." "If she sees them in Mr. Raymond's book, it will puzzle her, won't it?" "Yes, that it will. She will never be able to understand it." "Until she gets to the back of the north wind," suggested Diamond. "Until she gets to the back of the north wind," assented the lady. "Oh!" cried Diamond, "I know where we are. Oh, do let me go into the old garden, and into mother's room, and Diamond's stall. I wonder if the hole is at the back of my bed still. I should like to stay there all the rest of the night. It won't take you long to get home from here, will it, North Wind?" "No," she answered. "You shall stay as long as you like." "Oh, how jolly!" cried Diamond, as North Wind sailed over the house with him, and set him down on the lawn at the back. Diamond ran about the lawn for a little while in the moonlight. He found part of it cut up into flower beds, and the little summer house with the coloured glass in the great elm tree gone. He did not like this, and ran into the stable. There were no horses there at all. He ran upstairs. The rooms were empty. The only thing left that he cared about was the hole in the wall where his little bed had stood. And that was not enough to make him wish to stop. He ran down the stair again, and out upon the lawn. There he threw himself down and began to cry. It was all so dreary and lost. "I thought I liked the place so much," said Diamond to himself, "but I find I don't care about it. I suppose it's only the people in it that make you like a place, and when they're gone it's dead, and you don't care a bit about it. North Wind told me I might stop as long as I liked, and I've stopped longer already. North Wind!" he cried aloud, turning his face towards the sky. The moon was under a cloud, and all was looking dull and dismal. A star shot from the sky and fell in the grass beside him. The moment it lighted, there stood North Wind. "Oh!" cried Diamond joyfully. "Were you the shooting star?" "Yes, my child." "Did you hear me call you then?" "Yes." "So high up as that?" "Yes, I heard you quite well." "Do take me home." "Have you had enough of your old home already?" "Yes, more than enough. It isn't a home at all now." "I thought that would be it," said North Wind. "Everything, dreaming and all, has got a soul in it, or else it's worth nothing, and we don't care a bit about it. Some of our thoughts are worth nothing because they've got no soul in them. The brain puts them into the mind, not the mind into the brain." "But how can you know about that, North Wind? You haven't got a body." "If I hadn't, you wouldn't know anything about me. No creature can know another without the help of a body. But I don't care to talk about that. It is time for you to go home." So saying, North Wind lifted Diamond and bore him away. End of chapter 37. Recording by Maricel Cui. Chapter 38 of At the Back of the North Wind. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. Chapter 38. At the Back of the North Wind. I did not see Diamond for a week or so after this, and then he told me what I have now told you. I should have been astonished at his being able even to report such conversations as he said he had with North Wind, had I not known already that some children are profound in metaphysics. But a fear crosses me lest, by telling you so much about my friend, I should lead people to mistake him for one of those consequential, priggish little monsters who are always trying to say clever things, and looking to see whether people appreciate them. When a child like that dies, instead of having a silly book written about him, he should be stuffed like one of those awful big-headed fishes you see in museums. But Diamond never troubled his head about what people thought of him. He never set up for knowing better than others. The wisest things he said came out when he wanted one to help him with some difficulty he was in. He was not even offended with Nanny and Jim for calling him a silly. He supposed there was something in it, though he could not quite understand what. I suspect, however, that the other name they gave him, God's baby, had some share in reconciling him to it. Happily for me, I was as much interested in metaphysics as Diamond himself, and therefore, while he recounted his conversations with North Wind, I did not find myself at all in a strange sea, although certainly I could not always feel the bottom, being indeed convinced that the bottom was miles away. "Could it be all dreaming, do you think, sir?" he asked anxiously. "I daren't say, Diamond," I answered. "But at least there is one thing you may be sure of, that there is a still better love than that of the wonderful being you call North Wind. Even if she be a dream, the dream of such a beautiful creature could not come to you by chance." "Yes, I know," returned Diamond. "I know." Then he was silent, but I confess appeared more thoughtful than satisfied. The next time I saw him he looked paler than usual. "Have you seen your friend again?" I asked him. "Yes," he answered solemnly. "Did she take you out with her?" No, she did not speak to me. I woke all at once, as I generally do when I am going to see her, and there she was against the door into the big room, sitting just as I saw her sit on her own doorstep, as white as snow, and her eyes as blue as the heart of an iceberg. She looked at me, but never moved or spoke. "Weren't you afraid?" I asked. "No, why should I have been?" he answered. "I only felt a little cold." "Did she stay long?" "I don't know. I fell asleep again. I think I have been rather cold ever since, though," he said with a smile. I did not quite like this, but I said nothing. 4 days after, I called again at the Mound. The maid who opened the door looked grave, but I suspected nothing. When I reached the drawing room, I saw Mrs. Raymond had been crying. "Haven't you heard?" she said, seeing my questioning looks. "I've heard nothing," I answered. "This morning we found our dear little Diamond lying on the floor of the big attic room just outside his own door, fast asleep, as we thought. But when we took him up, we did not think he was asleep. We saw that—" Here the kind-hearted lady broke out crying afresh. "May I go and see him?" I asked. "Yes," she sobbed. "You know your way to the top of the tower." I walked up the winding stair and entered his room. A lovely figure, as white and almost as clear as alabaster, was lying on the bed. I saw at once how it was. They thought he was dead. I knew that he had gone to the back of the north wind. End of chapter 38. End of At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. Recording by Maricel Quee. Thank you for listening.